Recording in progress.
If you are here to do public comment tonight, please make sure that you sign up in the lobby. If the meeting starts and you have not signed in, you will not be permitted to speak. Thank you.
I hereby call the Marvin Planning Board meeting of February 18th, 2025 to order. We do not have anyone participating remotely except for, oh, Ken is on?
Ken is on.
Oh, even with, oh, there he is. Hello, Ken. Okay, so we need to consider allowing remote participation. So that would just take a motion.
Make a motion, go ahead. I'll make a motion to allow Ken Marino to join remotely.
Okay.
And all in favor? All right. You're in, Ken. We hope you feel better.
Thank you, thank you. It's no fun. Flu is to be avoided at all costs.
All right. Adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions, changes? Then if we can get a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
And all in favor? Aye. All right, so moved. And adoption of the previous minutes. Any questions, comments, or changes? And if I could get a motion to approve.
A motion to approve the
You're my
meeting
go-to.
minutes, or previous meeting minutes as presented.
All in favor? All right, so moved. And we're moving to our public comment period, and Austin is going to kind of manage that. He's going to be our ringleader this evening. So what will happen is Austin will call out names from the public comment speaking list, and you'll come up, he'll give you all of the instructions. He'll also give the planning board instructions, but we are not allowed to comment. So please do not take that as any type of rudeness, rebuff. It is the rule. We will not be announcing whether or not schools will be open tomorrow, so I hope you guys are all here for the right reason. We do not control the weather.
What? Since when?
Or even planning. I don't know, wintry mix. I don't know.
Thursday morning, tomorrow's going to be,
There'll be a flake, and it'll be done. I've prepped your audience, Austin.
We do have a lot of people signed up. Before we begin, I will read the rules aloud. Public comment is limited to 30 minutes. At 30 minutes, we're going to cut it off. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. As you're called, please approach the podium, state your name and address. Please be civil in your language and act within reasonable standards of courtesy. Use of slander, name-calling, personal attacks, or threatening speech is prohibited. The presiding officer, actually, we're already doing that, excuse me. This is not an open dialogue and not a debate. The board members will not respond to your comment in real time. Your comments will be summarized in the minutes. And if you interrupt, disrupt, or disturb a meeting, you can be found guilty of a misdemeanor, and you will be asked to leave. We should be fine. All right. First up is Bob Traylor.
Can I let my letter be from Robinwood subdivision? Can the letter I just handed out to all 7 voters get our position?
We do not allow written comments to be submitted per our rules of procedure, so we would need you to speak. They do have your letter otherwise, though, so if they want to read it on their own time, it just won't be included in the minutes.
And I was going to say, your letter originally provided is included in their packets, which will be included in the minutes for them. But it's up to you if you want to come up and speak.
Okay, I'm basically representing the homeowners, there are 8 of us, on Robinwood Lane and Dovewood Place. Private road in Robinwood subdivision. Some of us have lived there 40 years. And if this goes and they put 50% more traffic on that private road, it's stressed now to the maximum, and us homeowners are going to have to take care of the extra cost. If you put 4 new homes on it, that's 50% more traffic. We already can't hardly keep up with the maintenance now. Maintenance is solely on the homeowners because it's private. That's one issue. Number 2, the intersection of Marvin School Road and the entrance to Marvin School, traffic is backed up 3/4 of a mile now when school lets in and out. If you put 7 more homes almost on top of that intersection, 15 more vehicles roughly, it can't help the situation. And I'll just close with saying, like I said, we have a private neighborhood we've kept to ourselves. When we bought the property, to keep our integrity and not breach the integrity of the neighborhood, don't let any more people come in there on our private road, please.
Next up is this Aaron Rye? 9720 Robinwood Lane? Okay. Next is Will and Sandra Owens.
My letter to the board.
Can you please come up?
Okay. No additional comments, okay. Next up is John Ree? Ree, okay.
Yeah, I come here to talk about this wonderful development. Looks beautiful. And 7 years ago, I was relocated from Midwest to this wonderful city, Charlotte. And I found Marvin is even better. It's quiet, beautiful. So I built my house here in this preserved Marvin. And after I moved in, I found out actually, whenever I try to get on the highway, when I turn left in a rush hour, it's so hard because of the traffic. And come home, a lot of the time, actually, the cars just line up in front of our entrance. It's hard to turn right. So during the pandemic, it's a little better. After the pandemic, I still have a mortgage to pay. I still have to work. I still have to drive to out of town. So I still face the same risk when I try to turn left. Just traffic. You have to watch carefully, and otherwise we'll be T-boned by other cars. So right now, and some builder present this picture, say, they're going to build 92 more parking spaces just in front of our subdivision. And this is going to make us even harder for the traffic. And also, this 92 parking spaces are not enough. I'm afraid they're going to park inside our subdivision. That is going to make the traffic even worse. And however, for majority families, we have 100 families in the subdivision. This 92 parking space, that's going to be double that. And the majority family have kids. And this is going to be at least a tall building, 35,000 square foot space. That's going to be a lot of people. I just ask the council to consider this risk for the family and also respect the family. We choose to build our house here. We want a quiet neighborhood. Thank you.
Next up is Bobby Thompson, 5025 Flowering Peach Road.
Thank you, and I appreciate the time. This entire project took me by surprise in the last, I guess, 4 to 5 days, I was unaware of anything. We've lived here for almost 2.5 years. I'd heard about a retail project, and I think given a right space and environment, that potentially could work, but this is not the space or the environment. In addition, I thought we all voted as homeowners on the GO bond or something that we all voted on, and it was basically declined or shot down by 80% of the citizens of Marvin. So I thought that kind of killed all of this, but evidently it has not. I live in Preserve at Marvin, which will back up directly to this community, to this project. I drove down this week and looked at Pampas Court, which will be directly, I can see the houses through here. I can't even imagine living there and having lights that I've seen from the pictures, people, parking, traffic, noise. I don't know, nothing's been announced about a time ordinance, or I've heard rumors of a bar, I've heard rumors of bands till 10 o'clock, things like that. We're a community of children. Our bus stop is literally, 200 feet close to that area, which would be the entrance to this community or this project. We moved here 2.5 years ago to get away from all of this in Charlotte. Everybody said that this was great, the schools were great, the families were great, crime was low. I live on basically a cul-de-sac that backs up to that trail that has been put in, and I know there's some issues with that going on right now that I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to find out. We've had to have the police down, the sheriffs down numerous times. There's been tents, knives, fires started, things like that. When you put in a retail environment such as this, and I've worked in retail my whole life, so I understand this. I've never seen, first of all, any retail close to this proximity of a residential area. We're already tight enough. I think everybody's spoken. You're probably going to hear this narrative, basically, that we have enough traffic as it is. In the last year, even, it's taken us an additional 5 to 10 minutes to get to school every morning. And my son is 11, and he goes to Marvin Elementary. Additionally, talking to the general idea of retail as well, I don't think we can even fill the retail spots that we have close to our neighborhoods. And I mentioned and basically talk about Marvin Gardens, which is down this way where the new Publix was put in. I think they have vacancies. So I don't know what we're going to fill this with if they can't fill that. The reason why we chose here was because we were in proximity to basically retail areas in Blakeney that were designed for this and don't have residential areas backing up to them. So I think that between that, a strip mall effect, and I know these pictures are gorgeous and it kind of fits the VOM kind of motif here. But I just think that the increased traffic, the amount of people traveling, I've heard things about that people from other areas want to use golf carts to drive on the cart paths, and they will be able to walk behind our houses at 10, 11 o'clock at night. I don't think any of us want that. And I would ask that we take this all into consideration with all going forward. Thank you.
Next up is Sarah Namadi.
Austin, can I make a request?
Yes.
So I believe that the comments are around several different projects, so when you come up, if you could just maybe state what you're speaking to, that will help us process the information. Appreciate it.
Okay. Sarah Namadi. Okay.
Hello, I'm Sarah Namadi's son. We live in Preserve at Marvin, and one of the things I like to do when I come back from school is take my dog for dog walks. I think that such an establishment could encroach upon the peace in our neighborhood that allows for me to do that. Already there's a lot of cars coming by when school ends, so I do have to be careful crossing the street and stuff. This would definitely not make things easier. Thank you.
Next up is, and I apologize, Anaija Kata? Ananjaya? 10,000 for White Dogwood. Okay. Next one is Srinivasa.
Hold on, I can't read it. Srinivasa? Sorry, I can't read the handwriting. Yes? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next up is this Terry Croft? Is it Craig Crawford? Terry and Craig Lynch? Okay.
We're basically here for the same community from Flowering Peach. So similar to what everybody's saying, we came from New Jersey, overcrowded, everything that everybody's complaining about that it seems like we're trying to put here. I mean, to just echo what everybody says, traffic is a nightmare. We can't pull out. We usually have to go around the circle to just go left because we can't get out. It seems like that doesn't, when people build here, you don't take the infrastructure into account. The noise we can hear, the Ardsley, Ainsley people, like when they have parties, it's really loud. So I can't even imagine what it's going to be like when everything is here. They've talked about the school bus. I mean, we have to have police officers there because of all the traffic and things that go on and make sure that our children are safe. So I'm not sure what else will need to be put in play to ensure the safety that we all moved here for. Again, appreciate you guys thinking about this. Again, it's beautiful, but to the neighbor's comment, you know, Marvin Gardens, the places that were established when we moved here, that's why we moved here. We knew we could get to places. We didn't expect it to be in our backyard. So appreciate you thinking about that.
All right, next up is this Namid Jalal? Okay.
Thank you. So the building right behind this property, and I think you already know with how many people have joined today. I don't know if there was as many in your previous meetings, but how much concerned we are. And I'm particularly very concerned about this project right behind my building. It already is, that lot is already damaging my lot. I've issued a few complaints about it. I mean, verbally asking for help, but about the water eroding into my side yard and going back and eroding the other side, which Preserve Village of Marvin has helped to fix, and as well as our HOA. But aside from that, I mean, my personal house, I mean, security, traffic, echoing everyone else's concerns is really a huge concern. I don't know if it's a good idea at all to proceed with this. I mean, a commercial is not a good idea. You even have not started the other one to know how much of, heavy traffic, heavy population will be adding to this neighborhood. Why are you even thinking about another project, not even finishing the other one? You have not even started that. So it's a huge concern for me, and I'm sure for everyone else who's attending today. Thank you.
Next up is, say, Ananth. It says 4,000 Flowering Peach Road.
Hey, thanks for the time today. I'm in Preserve Marvin, and I'm part of all the folks who are there representing for the same issue with this WARMS project. I think I echoed the sentiment to Mr. Nestor on my last time. So I think we have the same concerns, security aspects of it, the traffic side of it. I mean, the traffic is going to be really messy. I think we are in a spot where we need to get out and take left all the time in the morning for the school drops and pickups and whatnot. So this particular commercial thing, we feel like unanimously that it's going to have an effect on traffic. And we also feel like the security part of it is going to be compromised. I feel like we are going to have unknown parameters getting inside our community, which we don't want to entertain. I have small kids. I moved here just for the fact being that this is going to be peaceful, this is a place, my realtor probably sold me saying that this place, no business establishment is going to come in. And I hear like one right here, one here, all over our spot. So I feel like the council has to reconsider this as a whole for the reasons being security aspect of it, traffic aspect of it. And again, we wanted to be in a place where we are in peace, not having to go through all these commotions and all those things. So I feel like you need to probably reconsider the decision. And in case you still have to go towards a commercial, at least try, please, thinking about an office space, 9 to 5, something which is small. The footprint is not going to be like 35,000 square footage. And I'm sure when you compare with Marvin Garden, this place is going to be so small for that such a big buildings to be erected here. So please think about all those aspects before you make a decision. Thank you.
Next up is Renee Engel, 9506 Dovewood Place. Good? All right, last up is Virasai Gopa, 1216 Carolina Cherry Lane.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak about my opinion. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Yeah, for the small meeting, we are unable to park our cars outside. Okay, how can we park when we, how can, we get more parking when we are going to have 4 big buildings? That is my concern. And that too, there is a huge traffic is, growing since last 3 years. Before 3 years, I was unable to, I was able to turn my car from my neighborhood. I live in President Marvin. Now, it will be very tough for us from our community people. It's very, very, very tough for us to come back and inside. We have only one entry and one exit. That is the major concern from my end. The traffic will be increased, huge, and it's very tough to handle for the new people and who is going to come inside and outside. If even we are not having any gates, so that is my concern. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that is all. Oh my gosh, there's a whole other side. Okay, we are going to keep going. Sankara Mesh, 4062 Flowering Peach.
I'm Shankar Ramesh. I'm one of the residents on 4062 Flowering Peach. But most of the concerns which everybody has expressed so far are our concerns as well. Starting with increased traffic, obviously there's going to be a traffic study, but still we still haven't really studied the impact of the traffic from the previous thing which was approved, the ZEPSA commercial thing. But in addition to that, this is going to be an additional traffic one. In addition, there's only 89 spots available here, or if I remember correctly. Most of the overflow parking is going to be in our community. I'm from the Preserve community. Those are 2 main things. And then I don't see the need for another commercial establishment so close to another one, which is also coming up right next to it. Those are some of the reasons. And the others which several of our residents stated. Thank you.
Next up is Anthony Taindle, 4009 Flowering Peach.
So I'm also from the Preserve at Marvin. Same with Sankara, served on the HOA years ago. And I think everyone brought up the point. I think we just have to think as a community, even beyond this. I think my expectation as a taxpayer and a homeowner is these projects do not go through. That's why I moved here, first from Ohio, then from Indian Trail to this specific community. Big lots, residential, commercials down the road. That's how we want to keep it. And also, I think beyond this not occurring is just moving forward how we don't have to actually address this as citizens to our elected officials. Because I think the community can agree, we don't want these types of projects within the confines of Marvin. There's specific areas we can go shop and do what we need to do. That's what's the beauty of Marvin. Close by, there's so many options, but the options don't have to be on our doorstep. And I think going back to other concerns that relate to this, there's paths that are, obviously the village manages them. People can park on the weekends, they can like go bike riding on these community pathways. Obviously, it's for the residents of Marvin, not for maybe others. And I don't necessarily, as a homeowner paying taxes, want to give additional access to parking as well as garbage pickups early in the morning or late at night, or kids just deciding to park there for whatever reason. We want our community to stay quiet. And I think our expectation is that we don't have to come as homeowners to address this continually, because I thought we did put this to bed. One other homeowner said this was voted down last year. And my hope is that, number one, this does not occur, and then number two, we don't have to worry about it continually cropping up as residents of the community. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you guys' service to the community as well.
Next up is Roxanne Morgan, 9719 Robinwood.
I'm not addressing the Marvin Oaks development. I'm addressing the development that's proposed to be added into Robinwood development that I've lived there for over 30 years. It is a private road. My concern is what is in your letter that I hope you will read. Also, I have a question about how our covenants could be overridden when there are ordinances in the zoning that say the more restrictive one should take the rule. And 1.81 all the way 1.82, 1.83. So I just have questions about that. The other question I have is how the person that seems to be involved with both of these developments was sitting on your planning board up until 2 months ago. And that seems to be a big conflict of interest to me. So I just wanted to raise that as a point. Thank you for your time.
Next up is Bill Morgan. Okay. Next up is Jim Vivian, 3324 Michelle Drive. You don't want to speak? Okay. Okay. Okay, next up is Jyothi Paladov. Sorry, I apologize for the pronunciation. It's 1000 White Dogwood Lane. Okay. If you need to speak, you need to come to the mic, please.
The main reason we moved to this place is, the way it is completely residential, and we want it to be continued the way it is, or it was. I'm just strictly against any commercial around Preserve Marvin. Thank you.
Next up is Vasu Bathina, 2000 Flowering Peach. Going once. All right.
Hi, Vasu Bathina, 2000 Flowering Peach. I live in the Preserve at Marvin for all same concerns that rise by different members of my neighborhood. We don't want this to remain, we want this to remain residential. Right, so, yeah, thank you.
All right. Next up is that Vamsi Vamur.
Hi there. Good evening. Just I want to echo the same concerns that my fellow community members expressed. On top of it, I sincerely request to not to consider any commercial zoning in this area, please. This is a pure neighborhood area, right, residents. Please keep it that way. That's why we moved to this area, and I sincerely request you to not to consider any more commercial developments in this area. Thank you.
Next up is Ryan Carter, 4028 Flowering Peach. No? Okay. Next up is Vamsi Kalak. Okay. Next up is Venkat Yarlagada.
Same?
Okay. Next up is Padma Yarlagada. Okay.
Majority same concerns. I mean, like, we call this as Village of Marvin, right? I mean, like, we want to keep it pure residential. And we have, I mean, like, in the neighborhood, we have very small kids who wait for their bus. I mean, like, in the community, we don't have any gate or anything. So if commercials come around us, it's really hard to keep crime or, like, traffic entering into our neighborhood. So with all these concerns, I mean, like, I echo with other members, I mean, like, in our neighborhood. In addition to it, I mean, like, these are my additional concerns. So please consider and then keep it residential as much as possible.
We are at the 5-minute warning. Next up is Rakesh. I can't make out that last name.
Hi, thank you for giving your time. I think I have the same concerns that all other residents have. I'm from Preserve 60090 Olive. I think Marvin fundamentally is not made for commercial properties. If you look at the lanes, all lanes are single lanes, right? And the traffic with this commercial property is something I don't think that Marvin infrastructure is built for that, right? That is one of the major concerns. Second is when we moved here in 2022 from Canada with the one premise that this is a residential area, right? We never expected, and we were told that there would not be any commercial properties in this area. And now we are sort of, as a family, we are sort of shocked that there are discussions on the commercial zoning. We are a community of young kids, right? All the young kids during the daytime, evening, they're biking on the roads, right? They're playing. And with this commercial property, we are sure that there would be inflow of traffic from this commercial area. There would be people who would be parking in our streets, right? So of course, there's a security concern. Third, most important is there are rumors that there would be restaurants, there would be pubs, there would be, I don't know what sort of shops would be there. It's 2-story, 32,000 square feet, massive establishment. And being the neighborhood just next to this commercial property poses serious security concerns for us. And in last couple of months, we have seen increased crime in this area, right? With this commercial property, I believe there would be more, right? And I think as the council, you should really think about the security of our neighborhood and our kids who are growing up in this beautiful neighborhood. Thank you.
Dear authorities, thank you so much for letting me share my perspective on this commercial establishment just outside the prison. I agree to what most of the people said and also what my husband said. We moved here from Canada 3 years ago, almost around the same time in 2022, with a dream of owning a house in a area like Marvin. And I think most of the people have talked about the security threats. We all have heard. One point that I really want to put more focus on is, like, owning a house in a community like this is a dream for many, right? So we put our hard-earned money as an investment with a dream that it will definitely be an asset for us. It will provide us, build some future security for us, for our kids, right? And we see it going into drain now, with this establishment. I have 2 girls, aged 10 and 15. My kids already live in fear when we are in America, when we hear about shootings every day in the schools, crime happening around the town. And there have been 2 incidents recently where the Marvin Elementary School was put into a lockdown due to a police activity chasing a criminal on one of our lanes or, on the Marvin School Road. So there was some criminal activity around the area. The school was put into lockdown. So we are living in a time where we should be more focusing on making our community more safer. We should be focusing on things like, bringing more security, not bringing any threats or damage to the security of our neighborhood. So I really respect the decision that will be, taken finally, but I wanted to share my perspective on various aspects, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more. That is Andrew Conway, 12017. Okay. Kristen Conway.
Thank you for your time. I'm going to keep it as brief as possible, given the limit. I want to echo a lot of the things said by my community members. It is in relation to the retail establishment. We moved here less than a year ago, and imagine my surprise. I knew about the one on Newtown as we did our due diligence. I had no idea that this was planned for our backyard. I'm going to focus on crime. We moved from Charlotte. We lived literally next to Hayden Hall. There were 3 strip malls within less than a quarter of a mile, which increased crime, it increased homelessness, and it increased the safety and security of our children. It was literally the reason we moved here. And moving here was a dream. For you guys to even consider this, you're putting our children in jeopardy, okay? You're increasing their access to predators. You're increasing their inability to ride their bikes on those roads. You're preventing their safety when they walk to and from school. All right? And that is not something I take lightly. I really hope that you consider turning this down. I also want to state, I also thought that the HOA was required to weigh in on this. And we have not been given that opportunity. Or if it was shut down before we moved in, why is this brought up again? So I also echo that sentiment, that this needs to be put to bed and put to bed for good. So this isn't something that our community continually has to fight for the safety, security, and everything else going on within this world. Thank you.
We have run out of time. That is the end of the public comment period. I do want to note this is a planning board meeting, not council. This is not the final decision. Also, please keep in mind that the planning board is required by law to hear all applications that are submitted. So they are doing their duty as planning board members to hear the process out. So we encourage you not to, don't be hard on them for doing their job. Thank you. Madam Chair,
I would like to just make a comment. I just want to thank everyone who is here for voicing your opinions for or against the different various proposed projects. You as citizens have a right and should take that right to voice your opinion. We are also your neighbors and choose to serve. Many of us went through similar things as you all are facing now, and that is why we serve on the planning board. So if you'd ever like to take that next step to protect your community and have a say, we always welcome applications to the planning board. So please feel free to join us. So thank you for your comments. And the Village Council is the deciding body on all of these projects. We are a recommending board, so we are the ones who go through and do a due diligence and ask a lot of questions. So we do appreciate you showing up today, but please also know that you will need to show up at the Village Council meetings in order to have a different kind of outcome. So, all right, let's go ahead and get back to our meeting, and we are moving on to the presentations. Oh, okay, well then, we're skipping F and going to unfinished business. Discussion and recommendation of zoning map amendment application 2025-1.
All right. So this was discussed at the last meeting. The village has received a zoning map amendment petition, rezoning application, to rezone the 7-acre property located at 9709 Marvin School Road. The request is to rezone the property from rural residential to SFR1. And this process is following the procedure outlined in our article, or 5.3 of our Marvin Development Ordinance. I'm going to go through my staff report, but included in your packets is the staff report, the application, as well as the letters that were referenced during the public comment from one of the homeowners or neighboring properties, as well as response and comments from the applicant regarding some of that. So if you have not had a chance to review that, I would recommend it. If not, we can kind of go through it. But I'm going to go through my staff report at first. So looking at the rezoning application, as previously mentioned, it is to rezone the property from rural residential to SFR1. The applicant's intent is to potentially himself or a future property owner to subdivide the property further in the future. Just a reminder that the subdivision and the approval of the subdivision or any future development on this property is not a part of this rezoning. Only being what is considered is the zoning, which, yes, in theory, if approved, could lead to future development. And I'll kind of hit on that here in a sec. Once again, the difference between the rural residential and SFR1 district is, in short, basically minimum lot size. Rural residential's minimum lot size is 2.5 acres, where SFR1 is a little under an acre. It's pretty consistent with the former R. Marvin residential district under the old ordinance, which is what this property was zoned. The applicant held a neighborhood meeting on Thursday, February 6th here at Village Hall from 6 to 8 p.m. Approximately 20 residents attended that meeting. A summary of the questions and comments received were regarding the private roads, the CC&R, and how they apply. And as noted there, as well as here, is that the village does not enforce CC&Rs. We have no enforcement authority on those CC&Rs. Those can only be enforced by the HOA and/or the property owners as a civil dispute. That's something that those property owners would have to, if this rezoning is approved or if any development happens on that property that's in violation of that CC&Rs or any CC&Rs, that would be something that the HOA or those property owners would have to take to court against said property owner. Any questions on that? I know that was somewhat of the discussion that came up at the previous planning board meeting. So.
Can I ask a technical question? Is there ever a time when government actually considers homeowners associations covenants?
Like I said,
I've never understood why a homeowners association has to fight civilly in
because
court.
it's a private agreement between when you purchase property and you're signing your closing documents and the disclosures and basically signing that you agree to the CC&Rs and all that stuff. That's a binding agreement between you and then said HOA or said restrictions to the property. Regarding legality of it, I actually even talked with Rick within Focus about this, and he said the same thing that I said, is that it ultimately has to be proven as a civil decision. In theory, what he did recommend is that we really shouldn't get involved in that. Not saying that as the planning board, that's something that obviously we can discuss. Planning board has a little bit more discretion in their review and recommendation of these land use decisions, i.e. with a private road and so on. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, with the council's decision, I mean, if they consider that, they can, or they can't, but it's not necessarily the village's place to be involved with any type of those, any CC&Rs for any development. And I will mention, under the new MDO, in any new development, we do have part of their application submittal for a major subdivision includes review of association documents, kind of for said reason, to make sure that obviously zoning has changed, and especially with this property being part of a older subdivision platted in, I think, 1978. Times have changed. I mean, village wasn't even incorporated at the time. However, like any new subdivision, and even ones that in more recent, the village has reviewed those CC&Rs just to make sure it is consistent with zoning and at least know any potential conflicts. But it once again, it's a developer agreement, or sorry, not developer agreement, but it's an agreement by the developer for the subdivision, and then that all property owners sign as that they'll adhere by. But it really still comes down to the HOA or whoever in those CC&Rs is the governing authority to enforce them.
What about the road right-of-way?
There to be no comments from the audience.
So, what did you say?
In terms of the legality of the road right-of-way, the private road, access to it?
Same concept. So what our ordinance says is that if any property is to be minorly subdivided or majorly, a minor subdivision can occur on an existing private road. Once again, the legality of ingress egress. I mean, that's something that if the property, I mean, I have those same questions. Ultimately, though, it's one of these things that if this property was already zoned SFR1, if this property was zoned R Marvin residential under the old ordinance, and he came to do a subdivision, I'd have to sign off on it. I do the same thing for any other neighborhood. I always, if I'm aware of what CCNR state, trust me, I've received a lot of calls on some of these older properties. And the first question is, how many lots can I subdivide? And I'm like, well, in theory, looking at raw acreage and existing road frontage, this is it. But I know that there are either CCNRs that are in place or that are tied with the property that I would recommend any person purchasing the property to at least to review and ultimately if they purchase the property and want to challenge that, go for it. But that's not, once again, that's not my place. That's somebody that's investing in property. So getting into review and discussion, this property was recommended to be zoned SFR1 with the adoption of the MDO. That was due to the applicant originally having a subdivision submitted. However, he did not get a formal application in prior to the adoption of the MDO to make it vested. I believe we mentioned this last time, similar to the 5 lots there off of Newtown. They had a application you guys were reviewing. That's why we had to zone it SFR1 compared to RR. However, this did not have a formal application in place, so that's why we reverted back to rural residential at the adoption by the Village Council when the MDO was implemented. So per Article 5 of the Marvin Development Ordinance, when considering a proposed amendment, the Marvin Village Council shall not evaluate the petition based on any specific proposal for the use or development of the property unless it's explicitly required by the ordinance. The petitioner shall not use any graphic materials or depictions of the proposed development except for those that would apply to all uses permitted by the requested classification, including applications for an overlay district rezoning, where the use is highly pertinent to the facts during the consideration of the amendment and or where a development agreement is to be made as part of the project. So just to simplify that, this is a conventional rezoning. The site plan that's included in your packets is used as a conceptual, as in showing what it could be, looking at it from worst case. I mean, if it's zoned this is what it could be subdivided as in theory. The next agenda item is a conditional rezoning. That site plan and all that other stuff is tied specifically to the rezoning. So those are the two biggest difference in the two applications tonight. Furthermore, when the board is reviewing, when the planning board is reviewing rezoning applications, it's for the rezoning only. The submitted site plan by the applicant is not tied specifically to the rezoning. The planning board shall consider both the consistency and reasonableness of the rezoning with the 2020 land use plan and any other officially adopted village plans. This includes the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area, the benefits and detriments to the landowners, the neighbors, and the surrounding community, the relationship between the current actual and permissible development on the tract and adjoining areas, and the development that would be permissible under the proposed amendment. Why the action taken is in the public interest and any conditions warranting the amendment. All that being said, that's vague, meaning that what you've heard during public comment and what has been previously discussed, yes, that's stuff that can still be considered as part of your guys' land use recommendations to the Village Council.
Can I say something? So I had some concerns about this development being so close to Marvin Elementary, and just wondered if the UCPS had any issues with that. So I actually contacted her name is Sarah Heimel. She is the facilities planner for UCPS. Just asked the question. And I got a letter back from her, and I just wanted to share with you guys what she said. It's not long, but basically what she said is that Union County Public Schools is currently tracking 771 vacant designed land units within the assigned cluster. per Union County Board of Education policy, Marvin Ridge High School is no longer accepting transfers due to high enrollment. They are currently at or above design capacity. They're sitting at 106%. And the middle school and the elementary school are not that far behind. She said additional residential construction contributes to high enrollments, which in turn exacerbates problems such as additional mobile classrooms, inadequate capacity for food service and restroom facilities, rationing of access to the media center, insufficient parking and queuing space for parents to safely deliver or pick up their children, and inadequate planning meeting space for additional staff. So I'll give this to you guys if you want to read it, but. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Who do I give it to?
Austin. Thanks so much. Your friendly neighborhood, Austin.
So this, I know we discussed this at the last meeting and kind of what all is included in land use. Everything mentioned tonight and even regarding schools, yes, is something that the board can discuss and weigh into their land use decisions. Once again, in any rezoning, this applicant shared that the intent's to subdivide. I mean, you can, I think I talked about this with the rezoning for the Vickery property last year. It's like you have to look at this when it comes to rezoning, look at it as worst case scenario with conventional rezoning because there's nothing to tie it to. Even though they can say their intent's not to subdivide and it's rezoned, there's nothing stopping them from then subdividing. So, regarding that, you're, like I said, looking at what could be if it's rezoned and what that land use impact would be. So the potential of additional residential units and the impact on schools, I mean, all that stuff is within your purview of discussion and part of your recommendation.
Speaking to the mic.
This has been on the planning board agenda. This is now the second meeting per our ordinance. You don't have to make a recommendation on this rezoning tonight. You can, like I said, staff has recommended approval based off of the land use plan and the goals and recommendations in it. It does fall within the 1 acre that the land use plan references and so on. However, then weighing the actual impacts on roads and ingress, egress, and even impact on schools, it's hard to, like I said, determine with a larger scale type development for a major subdivision, some of those studies would be required, but this is just a conventional rezoning, so it's hard to determine those other potential land use impacts. I know the applicant is here if they wanted to speak or say anything, or any questions for them. Jim, or you good? Will, you good?
The only thing is that, just want to put it back the way it was, zoning was just like the Vickery's property. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, in short, like I said, this request is being made with the change in the MDO, with the new expansion of the zoning districts, as well as the change of the zoning designation of the property from when it left planning board in April and was adopted, the MDO adoption in May, it was changed from SFR 1 to RR. So that's why the applicant has submitted this rezoning application.
Also, there is a SFR 1.
Hey, Will, if you're going to speak, you need to come to the mic. Applicants are allowed to speak on their applications.
Planning board, do you have any, let's open this up for discussion. I would like to have a vote today, if at all possible. Sure. One way or the other.
Makes sense.
Anybody, I know we had a lot of comments and concerns at the last meeting. Obviously, mine is about the private road. As someone who has to maintain a private road, I understand the cost of it and the constant battle with it. So without even knowing whether or not, if it were even able to be subdivided, if they could even access that road, is a question that I have. I mean, not even to mention the traffic.
You know,
Is your
It-
mic
it-
on?
yeah,
Thank you.
it's what seems to be a relatively simple rezoning is there's more, I guess, nuance to it. As Hunter said, this really would be taking it more or less back to the way it was before we came up with the new MDO. You know, allowing one house per acre, which is the way it was zoned originally before that. So, you know, in that respect, yes, well, it's taking it back the way it was. But and he could have done that originally, you know, before we adopted a new ordinance. But he still would have had the problem with the neighbors and the deed restrictions, which, as he says, are not really part of our consideration.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. If you don't mind my making a comment here. I'm sorry I'm late. We had some ice issues here and connectivity. I have an issue as to what you're saying, John. We have a situation here that the board is looking at approving it just as it is, what is allowed per the ordinance, okay? What I'm reading, and I'm looking at the letter here from Robert Taylor and the homeowners, regardless of what the planning board recommends, this may not get off of ground zero because it needs, it appears, 75% of the homeowners signing off on this. So I'm going to defer this then to you, Hunter. Is this just how can I put this? Is this just on the part of the planning board a motion of theatrics where the planning board is going to approve it or could approve it as it is with the ordinance, but it may not get off ground zero if it's not approved by the homeowners per the CCRs. Am I correct by this?
You're going to like my famous answer. It's yes and no. The short end, so the applicant has provided an attorney's opinion regarding the enforceability of the CCNRs. So with that being said, you have the applicant and the his attorney opinion stating that the CCNRs are null and void because of timing, whatever. And then you have the homeowners that are, you know, sticking by it. And with that being said, that does become a civil matter. So then, if the rezoning's approved, and the applicant then decides to subdivide and comes in either through the minor subdivision process, which is all staff review and approval, as long as it all complies with the minimum requirements for the SFR1 district, or under the major, which does require a little bit more review. It comes to the planning board for review, but it's still ultimately, if it complies, then it's approved by the village. With all that being said, if either route that goes, if it's approved by the village, he records it and starts developing, it would have to be the homeowners that would have to file an injunction or some type of civil suit against the property owner to halt until it's settled in the court. And that was discussed by planning board last time. It's the short end, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, in short? Like, does the village approve it and allow that to be more of a decided in the courts or decided civilly between the adjoining property owners and the applicant? Or does the village decide to potentially not or table it until it is decided? It's in short, I think it comes down to a legal decision. You have one quote-unquote legal opinion provided by the applicant, but you can always have a deferring opinion from the other party. So ultimately, that's why I don't formally have an answer with that, but all that does weigh on planning board as well as when it comes to council in their decision.
I mean, you know where I'm going with this. We're going straight into another Marvin Creek situation. And that's what I'm wondering here. It's like the the planning board is looking at doing something that is falling in line, but then we get into, you know, what is now the community, the homeowner association wanting it and not, then going legal. So I thank you for answering that. I understand where we're at, so.
Yeah, the process is following our ordinance, which our ordinance follows the general state
Right.
statutes. So,
Right.
like I said, it is a legislative decision. Council, I mean, as planning board heard tonight, and I'm sure when it gets to the council for a public hearing, similar comments and everything will be made by adjoining property owners. All that stuff in that legislative decision can be waived. I mean, in theory, can be waived. It's ultimately council's vote. I mean, that can be taken into consideration as mentioned under the benefits or detriments of the surrounding community and adjoining property owners. And if it's in the public interest, I mean, all that is part of council's decision. However, it's a legislative decision. I mean, like I said, it can, if it's not approved, it's a vote failed for approval, but if you do approve it, you justify with the consistency of the land use plan and why it's consistent and so on. So that's what planning board, discusses,
Okay.
and then provided to you for consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Will, did you want to come up and speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if there's, how are y'all? If there's a concern about the fact that the HOA, which is really not even organized, individually wants to come and do something civilly, let the process go through. By approving it, going back to the way it was, if it's going forward with a development, then it will be found out whether or not the HOA is organized enough that they can come after it civilly. I mean, the chicken and the egg is, let the chicken lay the egg, basically.
The audience, thank you for your passion and your discussion back there, but we actually need quiet in the room. Thank you.
If you understand what I'm saying, let the process play out. But I'm just trying to get it back to where it was before the rezoning, okay?
Planning board, any questions or comments? If not, we can just take a vote.
Just, and I do want to mention, like I said, during, as provided, like, I can't remember, did I include, is there a motion in your guys' packet? There is, okay. So the motion, either to recommend approval or to not recommend, either way, it is, it still goes to council, even if if it's not recommended by the planning board, that just goes as part of the packet to the village council. But your motion does include also a statement of consistency stating that it, per review, it is consistent with the land use plan and the goals and objectives of that plan and any other officially adopted plans.
And just to remind you all, if you make a motion here, we ask you make it in the affirmative, and then if you want to vote it down, then vote it down. That is just to make sure that we know, and if it ever is contested, that a yes is a yes and a no is a no.
So I'm actually going, if the planning board is ready, I will read the motion on the floor as written, and then we will go around and you either give it a yes or a no vote. Everybody good with that? Okay, so are we ready to vote? Again, we are not the deciding body, but this is whether we are approving this for village council to consider. So the motion on the floor is to recommend approval of zoning map amendment 2025-1 and find that the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the recommendations and goals of the Village of Marvin 2020 land use plan, other officially adopted village plans, and is reasonable and in the public interest. So we just need a yes or no vote from each member. Would you like me to come back to you? Yes. All right. Anyone would like to start? I'm a no. Yes. I'm a no?
Yes.
And
Hold on, I want to make sure that we're recording the votes as they happen. So Angel was a no. Marcus?
Yes.
Marcus is a yes.
Yes.
Michael's a yes.
I'm a no.
Kelly is a no.
Yes.
Rich is a yes.
Yes.
John is a yes.
You have Ken online.
And
And Ken?
Ken, we need your vote.
Yes.
All right, so the yeses.
You have 5 yeses and 2 nos.
All right, so then the village council, Bob, you guys will be reviewing this, I guess, at your next meeting.
I believe we're doing a public hearing.
One
Let
more
me,
public
so,
hearing.
yeah, just for clarification, so the next steps now, it'll go to the village council, they will call for a public hearing. I have discussed with the applicant because I will be out of town for the March council meeting to delay that public hearing till April. Are you still good with that? Okay. So therefore, the council at their March work session will call for the public hearing. So it'll be on their consent work session agenda at the end of March to call for the public hearing. That public hearing will then be scheduled for April, somebody give me a date, the second Tuesday?
It would be the second Tuesday,
April 8th here at Village Hall at 6 p.m. All adjoining property owners within 150 feet will receive the mailed notice once the public hearing is scheduled, as well as the property will be posted. And if we will also update our website, our projects page. I know a lot of the residents were here regarding that to follow that, but once again, April 8th at 6 p.m. here at Village Hall is the tentative date for the public hearing for this agenda item.
All right, we are now moving on to new business on discussion of CZ-2025-1.
All right, so this is a rezoning application. Give me one sec, get my file switched around here. Rezoning application to rezone the property located here next door. Oh my God, where is my, sorry. I got too many files, give me one sec. Here we go. Okay, so the village has received a rezoning application to rezone the property here located next door to Village Hall, located at 10018 Marvin School Road. The request is to rezone the property from rural residential to the Marvin Heritage District. This is the first time that this is being introduced to the planning board. Staff put in your guys' memo that that no recommendations are being made tonight. This is essentially kind of a presentation of the application to you by the applicant for the board to see, provide initial comments and feedback. You have heard from some of the residents tonight during the public comment regarding this application. And so once again, all that, can be weighed in. The overall project, I'll turn it over to Skylar or Chris, whoever, to introduce themselves with the applicant's team. And the documents provided in your packet include the neighborhood meeting report, as well as a presentation that was provided during the neighborhood meeting. The applicant has provided updated materials that I will share with you guys when they go through their presentation here. But once again, this is kind of an introductory, learn the project and ask any type of initial questions and provide any comments to the applicant.
Hey, okay, so I am Skylar. I'm here with DPR Design on behalf of Ravi. I just want to introduce the team here. So we have Chris Duggan, who's here as our land use attorney. We have Aaron Longo as the architect with Redline Design. Excuse me. So as Hunter said, this project has been talked about. It's the one right next door. It's a little under 3 acres in size. The rezoning proposed is from rural residential to Heritage District commercial only. As part of the 2020 future plan use, when it was deemed commercial, so that was kind of the direction that we went in as part of that original 2020 plan. We are proposing 4 commercial buildings. The total gross floor area of the 4 is about 35,000 square feet. We are proposing 2 stories for each of those buildings, so the actual footprint on the ground would be about half as much, about 17,000. Basically, the main goal and feel of the project is to be really pedestrian scale, walkable development that people from the preserves can enjoy, as well as people who are coming in on the Marvin Loop Trail, which we're proposing an extension of. So there's a path that kind of meanders along the front of the property that is an extension of that 12-foot multi-use path. I did want to address some of the questions that were asked. So a big one was traffic. We're in progress of getting a TIA, so we did our initial calculation of how many trips would be generated, and we're not technically required to do a TIA. However, given the concern from neighbors, we are proceeding with a TIA. So we've got two engineers on board that have provided proposals, and we're going to move forward with that.
We are trying to screen share. We're just having some technical difficulties over here.
No worries. Another concern that was brought up was about lighting. So the intent of the plan is to have 0-foot candles at all property lines so that no light will spill off of the property itself. Another big concern was how close the homes are on the rear side of the property from the preserves to the development itself. Once the map shows up, there's a 25-foot tree save area that was dedicated as part of the preserves area. So that's on the rear and eastern sides of our property. And then on top of that, we're required to provide a 20-foot buffer off of that. So we've got a diagram that shows like a cross-section cut of what that looks like.
Wait, can I ask a question about the tree preserve? So, and I vaguely remember this in a previous conversation, they are allowed to use the preserves, tree preserve, as part of their buffering?
That was all under the old ordinance. So in the MDO, a little background with the Heritage District was originally established under the Form-Based Code in 2022. And the Form-Based Code was a chapter of our original Chapter 151, which was our zoning code. When the MDO got adopted in May of last year, we incorporated in the language from the Form-Based Code specifically for the Heritage District in Article 8 of the MDO. But it also then, the Heritage District is tied with all the other aspects with the MDO, including Article 11, which is landscape and buffering. So that minimum buffer in that section of the MDO is a buffer type C, which is a minimum of 20 feet. Once again, this is conditional zoning, so some of those conversations, discussions can be had, but it does, if you do couple it with the existing tree preservation buffer for the preserve, you're looking at roughly 50 feet of existing vegetative buffer.
Sorry for interrupting, I just needed to clarify that.
No worries. And it's not in place of the 25-foot buffer. Like, that's not decreasing our buffer on our site. It's in addition to. So that's where the around 50 foot is coming from.
Is there a certain one you want us to have on screen?
Yeah, it might be 2 ahead, I think. It's a survey. Yes, it's this one. So the, like, C that's at the bottom, there's ABC on the right there, shows the 25-foot buffer that's on, or 25-foot tree save, that's on the preserve side, plus the 20-foot buffer on our site. And then I took like the minimum distance from like the closest point that curb and gutter hits from that buffer line to kind of show how much of a gap there is there. And then there will be additional landscaping that will be provided throughout the site.
Have you determined the breakdown of the 35,000 square feet from retail, office, restaurant?
No, we haven't. So Ravi's plan with this property is to develop the first 2 buildings, would be the buildings 1 and 2 on the left of the screen, and see what the market does. So I know that that was another question, was retail versus office. Earlier, there's more of a liking to office in this area over retail or restaurant. So depending on what that market is that comes in to want to lease out the space, that will dictate what the other 2 buildings are.
Let me add one more thing. Chair Cates and the rest of the board members. As far as the square footage and the usage, I've always said I lived in this neighborhood for almost 12 years, and I own that home. My kids were raised in that home. And as far as what goes in there, I'm as much concerned. And I want to know, I want the council and the board to decide what kind of businesses that would make it harmful for the neighborhood. I'm willing to not let those businesses, and I can take it part of that acceptance of the approvals, that those businesses are eliminated out.
I don't think that's our job at all. My concern is more of the parking. Even if you would, at the very minimalist, have 35,000 square feet of office. Office generally requires 4 per 100. That would be, 140 spaces. You have 92 total parking spaces for 35,000 square feet.
So typical rule of thumb when we're planning out mixed-use developments like this, we try to stay between 2 and 2.5 spaces per
That's not enough.
1,000.
I mean, that's not the typical rule of thumb. That's not.
From
Retail, office is 4 to 1, retail's 5 to 1, restaurants 10 to 15 to 1. So your
From
numbers
what
are-
we're seeing industry-wide, that is an appropriate number.
I'd like to see what industry you're using.
Okay, we can
Because
provide you
that's not
information
correct.
from Charlotte.
No, most retail is 5 to 1.
And I would like to also remind that the Heritage District does not have minimum parking as outlined in Article, I think, 13. However, as this came up in the previous rezonings for Marvin Grove, our ordinance has minimum and maximums for certain uses for parking that apply in other districts. The minimum for most retail and office spaces is that 2 per 1,000. So they are kind of in line with what the other section of the ordinance states, even though it does not apply for this type of rezoning. But once again, I mean, based off of comments and all that stuff received, that's part of this. It's trying to figure out to allow the applicant to hear the comments from the public, as well as any comments, questions, and concerns from the board, and see if there's ways to either provide you the information that you're requesting that justifies their submittal for you, once again, your information, or to take that into consideration, see how they can amend their plan, if possible, to address any of those concerns.
Right, I mean, you want the project to be successful. It's successful. If it's successful, you're going to have parking, which dictates what I just told you. So if you have retail, you're going to need you're going to need 5 to 1. If you want 2 to 1, I mean, what about the people that, if it's a successful operation, where do the other 3 cars per 1,000 go? Where do they park?
And certainly, we're going to take all of these questions and concerns back. At the time, again, Chris Duggan, represent the owner, developer, Ravi. At the time of the public meeting, we took the concerns back from the public meeting. We took concerns back from the public that voiced their concerns regarding the design of the buildings. And as you'll see tonight, that those concerns were taken in. So, certainly we want to hear the concerns of the board. We'll take those back and provide all due consideration to those. And perhaps revise the application or revise the proposed development accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, 2 stories might not be the answer here. If you wanted to know, I mean, if you eliminate a story, you get down to 17,000. Your parking is more in line with what should be there.
Okay.
I have a question for you all. I was not aware, because I don't typically come this way to go to work. I was not aware of the backed up traffic. Plus, my children are teenagers now, so I do not have to deal with Marvin School Road anymore and avoid it at all costs. So what is happening with the traffic there? Is there,
It's the round.
and is it backed up? Now, I know that when I come to this meeting on Tuesdays, I get stuck just trying to get in, just because of regular, rush hour traffic. So now we're talking about, I know the school gets backed up, because I've had the pleasure of sitting in that line without a school child in my car. So are the sheriff's department, are they concerned about it? Is NCDOT, is Marvin School Road a Marvin Road or an NCDOT road?
It's NCDOT, and as Skylar mentioned, per DOT's has a minimum standard of any, when commercial developments are being proposed along roads, that they maintain a minimum threshold on what triggers a TIA, a traffic impact analysis. And it's done by the highest proposed uses. There's a traffic engineered standard of like what those numbers generate. Above my pay grade. But in short, they took the 3 generated highest uses, and it actually was below that threshold to trigger a TIA, meaning if this was already approved, per se, the zoning was approved, and they were to go get their driveway permits for their ingress egress from NCDOT, DOT wouldn't require necessarily any improvements. However, the applicant has decided to do a TIA, which will be submitted and the village will review, and therefore that can, this is conditional zoning, so as long as it's mutually agreed upon between the applicant and the village, certain improvements based off of the TIA findings can be recommended or implemented into their plan. The same thing happened with the Heritage at Marvin, the Jones Homes project. They proposed to have the left turn lane, the right tapered. DOT wasn't going to require any improvements there. So, Jones Homes wanted to do those improvements to help with traffic flow for their future residents of their subdivision, as well as, address concerns from the public regarding traffic in that area. But DOT wasn't going to require any of that to be done.
Were the traffic circles working like they're supposed to?
Basically. but
Depends on who you
They
ask.
still get backed up. I mean, traffic
Correct.
is backed up all the way to my neighborhood too.
It's
from
one of
Lawrence
these
Circle to
things
there.
that, we discussed this during the neighborhood meeting, and I've discussed it with the applicant and his team multiple times, it's the improvements here, high level, you do have the traffic circle, so therefore, it's not like you're gonna have another roundabout or another, a signaled interchange, because of timing on top of backing it up into the other roundabout. Therefore, most likely what the improvements are going to show are having a left turn stacking. So if you're turning left into the development, like if you're exiting the roundabout and turning left in, you'd have that. You'd have some type of right tapered stacking if you're turning right into the development. And then I know for our site, and as many of you have experienced getting in and out of Village Hall, especially trying to turn left or turn left into Village Hall is not the safest. Most likely with the connectivity to the Village Hall parking lot and property, the Village Hall would become a right out only. It could be even something that this development's right out only, so you're turning right, and if you're going back towards Ray Road, you go around the roundabout and do it that way instead of trying to make a left across traffic. Those are just conceptual kind of high-level stuff that's been discussed, but once that TIA is received, myself and the village engineer will review. We'll probably also then have preliminary conversations with NCDOT on just what that TIA, what's provided in that TIA, like the findings of it, as well as then it will be provided to the planning board at the future meeting. What is the timeline on that, the TIA?
On the TIA?
Sorry, did you say when we were talking about the buffering, I was so focused on the actual tree preservation, I didn't hear if you said that, I see the red outline, which is like the footprint there, but is there a fence or what other types of, I
Good
I agree with the what did you call it, a zero something light, foot light?
candle.
Yeah, gotta get hip with the kids here. So is there a fence as well?
There is an existing fence along the residential property. However, the grade drops off. So if you could go back, I think back to that section, the other way. That one. So the grade does drop off from the property line. Their fence is about halfway through the tree save. So if you were looking at the property line, it'd be another 12, 15 feet off of that. It's a solid wooden fence.
So, yeah, to further that, so there is an existing fence on the preserve HOA, common open space, and that tree preservation strip. Something that I know that we came up and obviously would have to be discussed with the applicant and with consent with the HOA is potentially having a new fence installed. You don't want to have two fences like this because then it becomes a maintenance nightmare. but potentially having, if the applicant's willing and the HOA is willing to have, if the applicant's willing to install a new fence on the said property line, the actual physical property line of his property in the preserve, and removing the other, that's something that can be discussed and considered, but once again, there is an existing fence there. Maintenance of it, I don't know if the HOA is maintaining it, or I know the condition's a little, it's not the prettiest, but it's not a part of this development, but it's taken into consideration. So,
With a rezoning into a heritage district, we have businesses that are allowed and businesses that are not allowed. It's very clear what is allowed and what isn't. So I don't think that anything, it's very restricted, so I wouldn't worry as much about what can go in or not, because we've already eliminated a lot of things that we feel as neighbors would be harmful to families. So, but with that said, a lot of times zoning, the type of businesses that are going in are attached to the zoning plan. Like, the plan is attached to the zoning. So.
what do you mean by that? Like, kind of the full.
In terms of the Zepsa property, like, we knew, like, we were told, this is gonna be how much, like, these are the retail pieces. These are the, there's gonna be this building is an office building.
So it's.
I know
It's
that the
another
market
yes
will
and no
dictate
answer.
what goes in there, but at the same time, like, not knowing what could go in there.
And yeah, this has been brought up, I know, with Marvin Grove and even discussed here. So one, the village can only regulate by use, can't regulate who that use is. Meaning if you're a coffee shop, I can't regulate, nor the village in general can regulate if it's a Dunkin' or a Starbucks or a mom and pop coffee store. The only thing I can regulate if it's a coffee store is permitted. But with that being said, the uses specifically to the buildings, that's something that would be, once again, it would have to be agreed upon as part of the conditional zoning. I know that was discussed with the Zepsa property. It ultimately ended up getting approved that way, i.e., and what I mean by that is like limiting the amount of restaurants, or, because there's a fine line on pigeonholing of setting what buildings can be, what uses, and vice versa. But it's still kind of open for discussion. I do think, like, overall, the market will dictate with the type of uses. And then regarding, like, the office and retail portion, they have the same vision. Second floor office space, first floor retail. And that's the same vision that the Marvin Grove development had, and their rezoning was approved, and that wasn't like a specific condition. Meaning that if a retailer goes in the second floor and office goes in the first floor, it just has to be a use that's permitted per Article 8.
So can you, Ravi, I'm sorry, I don't, is it okay if I just call you Ravi? Because that's how I know who you are. We've never met, but I know who you are by that name. So can you just talk more about your vision? Like, why 4 buildings? Why not 1 building? Why not multiple homes? Like, can you talk to us about your motivation and where you're coming from with this?
I mean, just to give you a little bit of a background, Chair Cates, we were supposed to, on the side where Preserve's supposed to be, before the neighborhood got built, I offered Toll Brothers see if I could be the first home on the neighborhood on the left, where the common open space is. But what happened is that the Toll Brothers decided to dig up the dirt and put dirt that was not even buildable, so that whole area became a pool for everyone. And one of the residents who's sitting right here, technically would have been my back-end neighbor. So the amount of land, and at that time with the road realignment and everything, we could not have built a home, and with the Toll Brothers land is what I needed, because the road realignment would have taken a lot of my land. I wouldn't have left with much, but taking some of the Toll Brothers land. And which is what the town and I agreed, and which is what we were going towards at that point. But before, without even letting us know, nor the town, they dug up the whole area, put the vegetative dirt in, and compacted it. So that just fell apart. And then I stayed in that home thinking that that whole road realignment would happen, but the DOT decided to go with 2 roundabouts after the fact. But at that point, and I'm like, they asked me, if the town asked me if my property would ever be part of that heritage district, I said, yeah, as long as anything that the town has a vision towards, I'll work with that. I don't have anything specific, nor do I have anything that I want to bring in, because every one of them, a lot of them, I actually have known them for like 15 years, and some I actually met in that home, first time in my life. And anything that I bring here, I'm not going to bring in something, any business that would really hurt any of the families. Even as a council or the planning board, if you have any set of restrictions that you would like to apply, I'll take that. And if you want a set of square footage that you would see is more reasonable for this neighborhood, I'll do that. And security-wise, I work for Charlotte Police Department, and I've been doing that for 26 years. Something that I built, I'm not going to let it go destroy, somebody come in and destroying it. I know how to work with the security. And one other proposal that came about, I know some of them don't know of, or it was brought up, but I don't know if it's going to be practical, which was to open up a sheriff's office with few cars that the Marvin town will have a space there so they can host their police officers. So security, I can handle my property. Even if I have to add a security, I don't have a problem putting security in, because if I was going to flip that property, yeah, I would have flipped that property and move on. But this is something that I fought for that land. I lived in that home. My kids were raised in that home. I'm not going to just build something and go away. I'm going to keep it and keep that downtown of Marvin within the family. So I'm not going to make it as a business transaction. Whatever I build, I want the community to like it, want it, not something that I want. I want you as a planning board and the council, please take input from them. We already did a lot based on some of the conversations that we had with the folks who came in for the last meeting. They did not like the building. They said that the buildings looked so regular. And then I went overboard. I took this guy, I said, you know what, Aaron, just help me out. I want something so perfect that people can complain about the buildings. And this is a product that you see, I mean, it's comparable to any PDS houses, any preserve houses. Yeah, I know the cost of doing that is enormous, but I told him, look, if I'm going to put something in on that property, it has to be something my friends like it, that I've known for like 15, 20 years, 25 years some, and what the board and the town likes it. And I wanted to protect this community. I'm going to live in this community. I'm not moving out of Marvin until I go to the grave. That I can promise. So I have a responsibility for this neighborhood. I have a responsibility for all the citizens here. I'll promise you, I'm not going to bring in something. I don't even have a problem if town decides to add the kind of businesses. If you say 60% is only office, let it be 60% office. If you say all buildings can be 5,000, because the only reason why we had to go 2 floors was the maximum footprint could be 5,000 square foot. And if you tell me I can only do, given an exception, I'll only do 2 buildings, I don't have a problem doing 2 buildings. If that's going to add more square footage for everybody, or works both ways. So anything that anybody can think of, I can take it and, I have everybody here, my architect, my civil engineer, they all will work with the town. And what Mr. Lavelle said, yeah, I agree. If there's enough parking and for the kind of business that I'm looking for, I don't have a problem lowering the square footage too. I want something that everybody likes, not something that I want to force on people, nor I would urge you to take a decision on something that none of these people here who came in to protect it.
Well, thank you for sharing that background. I think it's helpful. And go ahead, Marvin.
It was helpful, I appreciate that, Robbie, but it didn't answer the question that she had. The question was why? Why commercial spaces versus residential versus?
I mean, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I probably might have lost it. So initially, when we wanted to build in Toll Brothers neighborhood. But what happened is that they decided to build a town hall. So, I mean, you just have the town hall, and then when they asked me, I thought it would be a good spot to have a little coffee shop and a little restaurant where I could go pick up my coffee. If I have to pick up my coffee, I had to go to Blakeney or at least drive a few miles to go to it. And what I'm going to build is something that I want to go every day. Not like it's a business proposition. Something that I can cherish, going there every day. Something that I could go eat. Something all my friends could go eat with me. Not build something that, I mean, I had a little bit of a vision, but it all boils down to everybody accepting it. And I do agree to what everybody has to say and what they have to say. But I'm just trying to do what the town has a vision about doing with that property, and I want to take all the concerns, grind it up, and make something that works for all.
I will say your position has always been a tough one, so because you are not necessarily you're not a part of the neighborhood behind you, and now you've got, government next to you, you've got school, you've kind of got this weird surround where you're capped off. So I think you have a challenging position to try, and it sounds like you're trying to make a bunch of different people happy. So, this is just me personally. I think you should look into some human-centered design concepts, and if you are really trying to create something that you're going to be proud of and use every day, is that for office buildings, for retail buildings? It doesn't sound like it. So, is this the right time? That's the other question. If you don't have a solid idea of what you want to build, and you're still open to things, is now the right time to submit a rezoning because it gets tied to?
Well, so yes, the site plan you see gets tied. And the way they've structured this, and you can even see with the bump out, and this is the same thing we even did for Marvin Grove, is that what you see, if approved, is what you will get. Now, let me rephrase that. In theory is what you're going to get. It will never be worse than that unless it's amended. We put in Marvin Grove specifically because, once again, same as this, it's kind of market, and we don't want to have a bunch of empty buildings. And ultimately, it's an investment by these applicants and property owners on investing in these plans, investing in the infrastructure and the buildings themselves. That there's a vesting period, meaning that they phase it, they have a build plan. They typically, obviously, if approved, they'll come in and do the initial grading, parking lot, infrastructure, and then build one, or as Skylar mentioned, the two buildings there on the left. In the development agreement, which the applicant has gotten the first draft to me, it's not included in your packets. It typically, once it goes through staff and attorney review, that will be submitted probably at the next meeting for you guys to also consider. It's required per the ordinance to be a part of the rezoning. We give some of that flexibility where if the applicant or developer elects to, they can develop it with less than 4 buildings or less than the square footage. We kind of, once again, the difference between this and a conventional rezoning, you are tying it to the site plan, and you can set some parameters on it as long as it's agreed upon. And but you don't also want to lock them into something that could change. I mean, when I say could change, like market could change or other stuff, and then you want to still have some of that flexibility, but we still have that control. And that's what you see here, is that their site plan has what their vision is. However, if it gets to the point with construction and other stuff, and they, I think, requested 7 years vesting, is that right? Say 8 years down the line, and or 7 years down the line, they only have 2 buildings built, then they would have to come back and ask for extension for investing or go through this process to amend their zoning, whatever. But that's what this is. I mean, this process sets those parameters, sets this vision, but we also can't fully, how am I trying to say this, lock in what exactly is going in here and there. I mean, that's where the uses come in. As Robbie mentioned, there are considerations of potential square footage allotment. We kind of did that for Marvin Gardens regarding the nodes and what uses are permitted in which node/out parcel. But ultimately, I mean, once again, this is the first presentation to the board. I will say the applicant has now, this is their 3rd revision to their plans, and I mean, a quick turnaround based off of feedback originally received from staff. Then they turned that around and presented that at the neighborhood meeting, heard that feedback and comments regarding elevations and other design, and incorporated that in, and that's what you can look in your packets what was provided at the neighborhood meeting, and you can kind of see the change. I mean, it's somewhat of the building square footage on top of the elevations and some of that design. So I can say that the applicant is trying to work with what's being said by the public, as well as the comments received from staff and now the board. And, you know, that's the process, is to see what we can get incorporated in and go from there.
Robbie, it sounds like you're trying to please too many people and you end up pleasing nobody. I think what you have to do is you have to come with a plan that's going to work for you. Do your research on what the market dictates. Do we need office space? Do we need retail space? Do we need restaurants? And certainly I know what you're trying to do in getting 35,000 square feet. You're trying to maximize your ROI. You're trying to get as much square footage on this parcel of land. But is that the best thing for this piece of land? Do you have 35,000 square feet of people that are ready to come in? Is office going to be ready to do that? Do people want to be on the second floor? I think what you have to do is a little bit more research and figure out what this land wants, what this land needs, what this land is best going to be used for, instead of trying to come in and thinking, you know, I want everything and then I'll back up from there. And we want this to be successful because we don't want to see buildings empty in Marvin. We don't want the second floor to be all empty. We don't want you coming in and trying this and that goes empty. So, I mean, figure out with the research that you're going to do on what this needs, what this area needs, and then come back and say, you know, I think this is what's going to work, because right now I think you're all over the board. You're all over the board here. You're making revisions. You said this is your third revision, and you're appealing to try to do everything. I mean, know what you want to do, stick with it, and make sure the ROI works. I mean, you're not doing this out of the kindness of your heart. You're doing this to make some money, and we want it to be successful because we don't want to see empty buildings.
I mean, the goal was not to build all the buildings at once, but I agree. I take that comment in a positive way, and we'll go back and get some of that study done and see how much we can fit in, how much we can squeeze, how much could, if any of them could be two-story, if one or two. We'll come back with some of that information, and by then we'll have a TIA complete, so that would put some apprehensions down.
Do some research on two-story buildings, too.
Yes, sir.
And I'll mention, like I said, some of the initial foundations of the Heritage District back in 2019, 2020, the village did do studies. There was a study done by DFI on the financial stability and or viability of the district, and all that was incorporated into then the land use plan on top of the small area plan recommendations.
It was in what year?
Give me one sec, I'll tell you.
Is it pre-pandemic or post-pandemic? That's all I really need to know.
The DFI study, February 2021. And trust me, and I mean, and I can say this too, is that regarding the Marvin Grove or just, I mean, the Heritage District in general, I do receive a lot of calls, interest in, I mean, office space is kind of something that I do see it being a good mix of. Not saying all office space, I'm saying like the need for office, I mean, and part of that is there's a lot of people that work from home during COVID and they don't want to work at home anymore. But still the vision of the Heritage District being the town center, the downtown, and you look at other traditional downtowns and all the, you know, most of the businesses there are local, they're not chains, and I mean, that's what the Heritage District is intended to be. Your chains are going to locate on your major thoroughfares, your railroads, your Providence, and because they're looking at household income, properties already zoned that, I mean, all of the above. And so but that doesn't mean that that can't happen here either. I mean, it's going to be determined by the market, and ultimately, like, my approach is that, yes, like, some of this has been done by the village in our studies, but if a property owner or an applicant's going to invest money into this, I mean, to your point, Mike, it's like, hopefully they've done their research, but, you know, it's their investment. And if, I don't think Ravi wants to develop, I mean, he's conveyed that tonight, and obviously the village doesn't. So, once again, this is, you know, conversations and stuff where it allows the applicant to get some of this information for you guys to present at the next meeting and address any of the additional concerns regarding their proposal.
Robbie, you want to know what the market dictates? Put up a sign, coming soon. You'll get calls. I want to put an office in, I want to put this retail in, I want to put a restaurant in. Put a sign up.
I can't do that without the rezoning.
Huh?
It's true.
You can't put a sign up?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be marketing the property not illegally wrong.
Residential at the moment. I will
Well,
say.
sorry.
Yeah, misleading.
I
That
will
would
say
have been a
that,
good way.
it's a good idea. If
So,
it was legal, yeah.
one other, because I do want to, like I said, kind of keep getting some feedback and stuff from the board regarding their current proposal. I want to look at the site plan and see if there's any comments, questions on the site plan specific, and then I do want to talk about the elevations that the applicants provided. Like I said, the other stuff regarding uses and the parking, that's stuff that I'll work with the applicant and make sure that they provide that information for you guys at the next meeting. But is there any questions, comments, concerns on the site plan that's on the screen?
I've got one. Is all of that hardscape around the buildings, or is it, all the way around?
Yeah, so it's proposed as hardscape on this, kind of as a worst-case scenario. It's not realistic. We didn't want to put in trees per se to be committed to putting a tree in that exact spot. If you go to the first one, that's more of like an illustrative view, that'd be more of what the vision is for the property. But in terms of knowing that this is kind of bearing Ravi to do exactly what's on there, this is more of a vision in terms of some plaza spaces between the buildings, some tables and chairs if it does turn out to be a restaurant use, some treed areas. It would definitely have a lot more shade than what is on that plan.
I figured, I
Yeah.
just didn't want to go way down the road and all of a sudden say, hey,
It's all pavement?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
With that
understand.
amount of impervious space, is there not? what are the
Stormwater?
Requirements for stormwater and.
So, and I'll let Skylar hit on this a little bit. This was originally brought up in kind of the initial staff comments. They're proposing to do underground detention as well as infiltration. Now, Skylar, I'll let you take over and speak more on that, and then I'll
That's good
come
too.
back. I'll come back to the second part of my statement.
Is this house currently on Public Works, or is it
It's on
well and septic?
I have water on the front, septic is in the back, but sewer is in the back, but we never tapped in.
So water and sewer, there's water available in Marvin School Road, there's sewer available on the rear side, on the preserve side, there's an easement with an active sewer line that runs through there, and there's an easement that tees off to this property. And then in terms of stormwater, there's two scenarios that there could be, and this is gonna depend on likely cost and what makes the most sense for the project, but the first option is to do permeable pavers on about 90% of the impervious that you see there. So parking lots, sidewalks, crosswalks, all of that would be permeable pavers. So that is essentially treated as permeable, so doesn't infiltrate. We've had the soil tested, so it's not really a great site for infiltration, as Hunter was mentioning. However, in doing permeable pavers, you can do what's considered a low-density development. So what that means is if you have under 25%, it's 24%, built-upon area impervious, you do not have to do stormwater management. What happens is it's more treated as it would be in nature. If the whole lot was grass, it permeates through the pavers or it permeates through grass. It slows down. There's about a 12-inch stone layer that's beneath it that water is stored in, and then it's slowly released. So that's the first option. The second option is to do a traditional, it's just pavement with inlets, like those storm grates you see in parking lots and in the plaza areas. And then there would be something to the likes of a very large underground vault. So the runoff on the site goes up to the right-hand corner, right-hand upper corner, and the right-hand lower corner. So what we would do, given we've heard from the neighbor that he's got some flooding issues on the northern side, northeastern
He's
side.
really serious about that, I mean, yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, no, I get it, yeah.
So he's got some flooding issues, so we are aware of that. However, this is not going to make that situation worse. The law in North Carolina is you cannot make it worse as it already is. So knowing that, we will split the flow, so the outfalls will be on the top right, bottom right corners, whether it is permeable pavers or a vault with some sort of treatment system that's also underground, something like a cartridge or underground sand filter. So stormwater has been very well thought out, one, because it's a very high cost item, and we wanted to make sure that Ravi is aware of what he's getting himself into in terms of developing it, and two, because we knew that that was going to come up as an issue, because everyone is always concerned about how much runoff a project like this would generate.
And now to add to that, if the rezoning is approved, I said if the rezoning is approved, I mean, just like any other development, the next phase would be for the applicant to get full-scale engineered construction drawings for the land development.
Well, on that, before you do, I mean, couldn't he just rezone this, or couldn't we rezone? We don't need all of this for the rezoning. Can he just rezone it from its existing to?
No.
A plan has to be tied to it.
With that being said, if rezoned, then they would move to the engineered documents that would be reviewed by the village. We do have a stormwater ordinance. Our stormwater ordinance goes a little bit above and beyond NCDEQ's minimum regarding retention and the storm event. So all that will be reviewed for compliance. DEQ is the one then that permits developments for post-construction stormwater. Where was I going with this? With all that being said, like, so the two, as Skylar mentioned, like the two options presented would have to still comply with our ordinances as well as with DEQ requirements. For some random reason, they would have to then, let's say, do a pond, an actual like wet pond, above ground type system. They would have to then come back and amend their conditional zoning if it's approved as you see, because to what this is it's a site-specific plan. They're not showing any type of above-ground detention facilities on the site, which if they were to add one, it would eliminate parking, which then obviously it's a different conversation. So they would have to come back and amend that plan to do so.
I know we've all talked about, there's parking, lack of parking has already been mentioned. And then as well as can the Marvin Market bear having the Zepsa property go, having this property be developed? Are we looking at a bunch of empty space? You know, that's a concern, obviously. And for me, just in terms of the buildings are beautiful, but look more suited to South Park rather than the Heritage District vision. I do think they're lovely, though, from an architectural standpoint. I mean, but it does not seem to fit in with.
Which elevate? Are you looking at the ones in the packet? Well, you want to move to the elevations now?
Oh, they might be the old ones.
Do you want?
Completely
Yeah.
after
So once again,
So at the first meeting, there was concern about that because it
Yep.
was a little bit
Yeah.
boxy. And so
Why
doing more
why
of
is
the
this on our
equestrian
packet?
wood, things like that, I think is
So do we have an old
we have a
packet?
video too. No, so once again, this was submitted, what's in your packet was what was submitted and presented at the neighborhood meeting. The applicant, like I said, got me these revisions tonight to be presented for your guys' initial feedback.
Where is that?
we don't
Can you
have.
share
Oh, we
the
don't
video?
have it.
Yes.
Can you share the video?
His computer.
I'll just share.
Sorry.
Representatives at that meeting didn't like the boxes, and they went back, that's why we see the revision now.
But that comment was almost verbatim what we heard from the public.
See
so-
some consistency.
Yes. So Aaron has worked very hard to take into consideration a lot of the comments they had
Rendering just to see how it looks.
from the road
Dennis,
and
Can we move on
within.
to that rendering, please? I'm looking at the-
Guys. We are trying the best that we can.
Have you guys, and I don't know if you have to come up with a plan for this, but one of the things, well, several of the things that people talked about at that meeting was because there is a development that's behind it, lighting would be, coming.
Yeah.
It's only going to be 4 feet tall, so none of the lighting is going to
leave the property. It's all gonna be there.
This is the redesign.
So this shows some of the pedestrian scale lighting that Ravi's talking about. There will also be some lighting on the buildings themselves as well as the parking lot, which is, the parking lot one is usually the one people are worried about. So the light fixtures that Duke Energy uses now, if Ravi decides to go that route, or it will be something similar for a private development, they do not light up. They're actually all down lights. So they would not be spilling onto other properties. And that's part of the study. Once you get into the construction documents, you do a photometric study, which is the 0-foot candle, which just means like where you're standing, there's no light around the whole property line.
So it's not going to be getting into people's.
No.
And this is from the parking lot.
This is behind the building.
It'll actually be less than what the village of Marvin produces.
And this is the road.
Yeah, this,
drive.
From Marvin School Road.
That is so much better.
That's like really in line.
Not that it wasn't nice before, but this is so much more like
The
The
vision.
residents
dealing with the
turned it
charm.
down the day
The
they
charm
saw
is
it. We
here.
changed it completely before we came back to the meeting.
Well, you listened.
so, and also to add on the lighting, per the ordinance, basically, once again, if the rezoning is approved, one of the requirements of those construction documents is a photometric plan. We do have a lighting ordinance that requires, basically, light pollution, or, I mean, in short, the lighting that's installed for a development has to be contained on the site, meaning that it's not supposed to negatively impact adjoining properties. They would submit a photometric plan that shows those foot candles, the actual illumination of the lights, if installed, and basically it would have to show, if you install one like at the back of the parking lot, it couldn't have anything over 0 that, off their property. But what they're proposing, like I said, is low impact, but it would still be reviewed as part of the construction documents to ensure.
And all the siding that you see is hardy plank, it's not vinyl. We're not gonna use any material. It has to be comparable with PDS or Preserve. We won't use any material cheaper, or it would be on par with any of these neighborhoods.
And do y'all have any, because one of the things that they talked about a lot was the concern for traffic. So is there anything that you all can do in your plan to help mitigate some of that?
Yeah,
We are doing a traffic impact study, which is we're gonna have a report coming back from them. Once that's complete, we could even have a turn lane in, left lane into the community, because the part of that land is something that I donated to DOT when they were doing the roundabout. So we do have some land that we could use to do it, left lane in, so you're not blocking any of the traffic that's coming from either roundabout or from railroad.
And what the thought would be possibly a right out of that center. So you have that connectivity up in the top left-hand corner to the Village of Marvin Town Hall. So that left turn lane then would provide for access into the town hall as well. You get better access, better flow, and then the flow would come out to the right, go around the roundabout.
And I just want to add to that, it is an NCDOT road, so any improvements ultimately are going to be up to the decision of NCDOT, unfortunately. So that's part of this traffic impact study, and Hunter's given us a contact that you guys work with over at NCDOT to kind of get their buy-in of, would you guys even support putting a turn lane in here, et cetera? Because I know they have requirements on like how close you can be to a roundabout, which in terms of Village Hall, in just first glance, it looks like it would be too close to put in a turn lane for stacking in the roundabout.
Could you also, when you're talking to them, could you also get them to do that for Marvin School, elementary school?
And you can see the area where the DOT has, so on the bottom section of the outline of the parcel, you'll see where it comes up into a, right there. Yep.
A bump.
That's the DOT, that they took that portion of the land when they did the roundabout, so.
I had to give that land for the same thing. Maybe I could use the same land, ask them to let me have a lane in. So that would really help a lot of the traffic, and even there are two things that's gonna help with this. One, the number of parking spaces. I know one of the residents has raised concern about how many parking spaces. We don't have any place to park. But if it's a combined parking, I mean, we could share, I mean, you could have 100 residents here. They could all park on my property or here. At least that's one problem that you could have solved. And then if the lane change, I mean, I know that it's really risky to take a left turn from the town hall. You could avoid that going, you know, so close to the roundabout.
Well, do we know the traffic counts now
Yeah, we do, based on what we proposed.
Yeah, well, so
the
their
numbers.
TIA will, so the state, DOT does either annually or every 2 years, annual traffic count, or ADT, average daily traffic count. I can pull it up, but in short, part of their TIA, they will do a real time during peak hours of the traffic.
Well, my question was going to be, well, we probably know, do we know from when the roundabouts were finished, and then the amount of increased traffic this center will bring?
Yeah, so they ran, the traffic engineer that will be under contract has done a trip generation basically to figure out if it would be triggered or not. And they did one for this, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I know I sent it to you, Hunter.
Yeah, but it didn't trigger the TIA, but.
But we're still doing it.
We're gonna still do the TIA.
Yeah,
The question is, can these farm-to-market roads handle more cars?
Based on that, I think we should be fine, but we're still going to take that as a mile.
I do have to say something, Michael. Again, when you're talking about the school, you're getting on the road at 6:30, 7, what time does the bell ring? Just don't give parents dropping kids off by 10 after 7, because my kid's now the youngest 17.
Yeah.
So I haven't been there in a long time, but the traffic was always a lot.
It's early,
But
it's 7:30.
And that's when people
these
from Marvin.
offices may not be opening till 8, 9 o'clock, which is going to be after school, so that's one portion of it. Yes, during the day, there's going to be more traffic on the road. School lets out at, what, 3:30? So it's not at rush hour, but it would be interesting to see what the TIA does bring back.
So, and the other question that was brought up before is like in terms of if a coffee shop is installed versus a restaurant that's open in the evening versus office hours for offices, et cetera. What the traffic engineer has run is a worst-case scenario. Basically, if everybody showed up at the exact same time is what he's running, and it still didn't trigger it, which to me was also surprising that it didn't.
Yeah, so, and I don't think I included this in your packets, but it will be a part of your, on the agenda for next month. So just to kind of review, so based off of the 3 highest use, so this is per like DOT standards, so basically is international traffic, I don't know, whatever, ITE. Basically, like I said, there is a standard that, based off of the uses and what those peak hours are, and that's what they run in their initial model. So they have, just once again, these are the 3 highest uses, strip retail plaza, high turnover restaurant, and general office. And the size, square footage, and all that. During AM peak hours, all of those combined, which AM peak hours are typically defined within a 2-hour, but typically your high traffic period, 7 to 9. 195 total additional trips per day. PM peak hours is 288. The big number that's making those higher is the high turnover restaurant. So on average, the average daily trip count is 2,046 trips. To trigger a TIA per NCDOT standards is 3,000 average additional trips per day. Or 400 during those peak hours. So they technically don't meet that threshold to requiring a TIA, but once again, after conversation with the applicant, they've decided to do one, so we can at least, like I said, further conversations with DOT on necessary improvements. But it's always interesting, trust me, looking at these peak hours, but
I mean, we want traffic, obviously. It sounds stupid, but, you know.
yeah, I mean, and once again,
Right, you need it.
I don't want add any more traffic than what this roads would require, but I'm still doing the TIA, even though it's not required, just to make sure the traffic can meet the minimum standards and it doesn't crowd up these roads.
Listening to the neighbors earlier on, this particular neighborhood is already going to get hit with, while they have done a good job of mitigating some of the issues, or concerns for residents with the Zepsa property, they're already going to have a high turnover restaurant behind them. I think that would be considered a high turnover restaurant, correct? And we don't actually know what's going in the Crane store, and this property is even closer to some of their homes. So, having a restaurant or anything that could produce noise, even while we have noise ordinances, I feel like we should be protecting this neighborhood more with this particular property. So I would lean more towards, if this were to be developed commercially, it should be like commercial offices, you can't have empty offices, but at the same time, it's just gonna be too much, it's gonna be too much.
We're in a big conundrum. We want a district with shops and restaurants and.
Well, some people want a district with
Well,
shops and
it's-
restaurants, yeah.
We voted it in. I mean,
Well,
we
yes.
have the district. We
Yes.
have the district where we want
Unfortunately,
shops,
half of the
restaurants.
people in this neighborhood did not even live here when that vote happened, so, and we're not even clearly aware of it, so,
But
so,
I
you
get
know,
it. I mean, but it's passed. We have a district.
It is what it is.
It
yeah.
is what it is, and to be successful, we need a lot of traffic. We need a lot of homes. We need a lot of people close to this district. We're getting their homes, now we're looking at getting some businesses in here. And we're in a very tough spot. We want it to succeed, we don't want traffic.
So,
You know,
Well, we need safety too. I think safety is a really big, I mean, I heard it a dozen times, that having a commercial, with crime on the rise and people feeling safe with their kids playing in the streets.
If we are gonna have a restaurant, I'm not just gonna allow any other restaurant, it has to be comparable to what Maui can afford or Maui could pay for. So any restaurant that I would request or ask them to move or would entertain would be something that's not gonna pull any bad characters or bad company from Blakeney or beyond Blakeney, that would just make it harder for us to contain.
I don't know if you can promise that, though, that's the
I
problem.
mean, I'm
It's
gonna
like
have
you can't,
security and, I'll try my best, but of course, you always have an option. If the sheriff's department do really want it, they can have it for the most discounted price they can think of, because having Marvin police cars parked in front of my property, that's even better.
So I did want to add too, with him starting with buildings 1 and 2 for the development, the first two, they're the farthest from the preserves. So if a restaurant owner did approach him to do that, you'd kind of be getting a taste of what it would be like in the buildings farthest away. If there's no one entertaining a restaurant, then Ravi's not going to put a restaurant into the other buildings that are closer to the preserve.
I was only thinking, because the way I designed, if you look at the way the entrance was designed on both sides, I had sit-outs for both the buildings on both sides, hoping that one would be just a coffee shop and the other one would be a restaurant. And everything else is more or less sort of mixed use, where you might have a dental office, a UPS store, or something like that. But beyond that, I wasn't expecting a whole lot of retail, except those two buildings on the right and left of the entrance.
To remain neutral, I have to say, I've got Publix in my backyard. It has not brought additional crime. There is a little bit of light that's out there because it has changed. I mean, they're much higher because it's a much larger parking lot. And again, I was on the planning board when that was thrown out there and discussed, so on and so forth. Sure, I didn't want it in my backyard, still voted for it. And the benefits that are there now. Today, I was picking something up, or I had to drop something off at the UPS store. There's about 4 or 5 people in there with their golf carts that are from my neighborhood that are in there. So, again, it's one of the things that we do want, the convenience. I don't want to have to drive 2 miles to go to a Harris Teeter. It's nice having the Publix right there. There are other restaurants that are filling in there. There are still open parcels, and those parcels may remain open forever because, again, that area can only bear so much. So it's,
and to add to Marvin Gardens, I can speak that part of the reason why those two out parcels haven't been developed is regarding the actual plans of the Providence widening, as well as certain
But that widening
restrictions.
is done. That's never gonna happen. They've taken it off the books.
No, it's slated for,
Well,
once again,
it was
DOT slated.
They had pushed it to 26, then to 28. You
Exactly.
can't even find it now if you go out there and search.
But there's other properties, there's another property, not to get off topic, like on Bonds Grove in Providence, that's in the village of Marvin that I receive a lot of calls on. But it comes down to, once again, somebody investing in those properties where DOT's already got a project on their books in their state transportation improvement plan, the STIP, and therefore it detours type of development, because they're not sure.
Traffic light at the Bonds Grove there.
Well, I think, Hunter,
That-
you're right.
that's-
I mean, anybody doing their due diligence on
Correct.
Providence Road is gonna be very, hesitant until we know for sure. The uncertainty makes it very difficult to proceed.
proceed.
But, you know, and then building onto, you know, the heritage issue in general about, you know, convenience, and I know parking and other things, is like, when the village established this district in the numerous years prior that went into the planning of this, it is intended to be a full, I mean, walkable, connectable, all that stuff. This proposed project would have access to the Marvin Loop, which then, once completed, would basically connect about 70–80% of the neighborhoods in Marvin, if not, you know, more. Sorry for the people that live on the other side, maybe someday. But, you know, that then helps where, you know, nice days, I mean, I can go out there on the Marvin Loop, I mean, during the spring, summer, and you'll see on average, I mean, just driving one direction, 7 to 10 people walking, and their dogs walking. And so that's another thing that goes into the planning of this and where the district's situated. And once again, I mean, it's multimodal modes of transportation is becoming more and more. People either want to walk or be able to ride a bike to something, or they can hop in a car or whatever. So that's how this district is set up, to intend for multi-modes of having access to these developments.
Yes, but we can't continue to short parking for the walking, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's the same argument for why there's not enough parking in each commercial development that comes in front of us. Well, it's supposed to be a walking district. Well, people love their cars. And while I see a lot of people walking their dogs, they're walking for exercise and they're walking with their pets. They're not walking to something. Now, there isn't anything here yet to walk to, but, you know, so I think that's a slippery slope. And I'll tell you, like, I refuse to go into Trader Joe's in Glen, whatever that, Piper Glen, because it is the worst designed parking lot. There's never enough parking. It's never big enough. I won't go to Trader Joe's. I love it, but I won't give them my business because they can't design a parking lot.
Everybody
Yep.
else
I know, you're all messing up the parking lot.
part of their
Well-
business
It's not Thrive
plan.
anymore.
Hey,
But,
you-
so,
Nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded, right?
I don't know. I don't go there. I don't know if it's crowded or not, so.
And staff, I mean, we've heard, I mean, especially with the Marvin Grove rezonings as well as this one, you know, once again, when I started with the village and with the Heritage District, the form-based code being in almost its final form draft, like, the parking was already discussed and recommended to not have a minimum parking. I'm not saying I agree with it or not. I mean, I think it's great in theory and concept, but when you're kind of piecemealing it, it is hard to kind of see the greater picture. And so we've already, I mean, not that it necessarily changes for this unless we once again agree to some type of minimum parking ratio, but, you know, looking at the parking section in the MDO and basically doing a text amendment to Article 8 to basically say that it has to comply with the minimum parking requirements in that section. So, and we had the same conversation with Marvin Grove, and it's just still, it's like, yes, how do you determine restaurant and the use, or the amount of seats, square footage, employees and stuff, and that, I like to do it with a simple ratio, and kind of like how they provided. That's how all the other uses are broken out. But ultimately, I mean, it's been great discussion on that, and, you know, we'll see how the applicant and stuff can potentially address some of these concerns and provide those documentations for the board for the next meeting.
Well, this is the way we wanted it to happen. We wanted it to happen organically, and we are in the midst of it happening organically.
I know. Like I said,
Here we are.
if there was things done a little bit different,
We asked for.
I know.
We didn't want the other way.
I don't understand why, if what Mike is saying is true with the parking ratios, why ours are so much lower than that? Why would that be?
Because from a planning standpoint, if you look back over time of how municipalities used to regulate parking, and then you look at your larger, older developments with, and larger shopping centers typically have more parking than needed. And it's because that's what the trend was seeing, is that the ordinances and requirements were due, because they had a minimum, and that was kind of it. More parking was being required for these developments, and then you had more impervious and all this stuff. So the trend from a planning regulation standpoint and became doing minimum and maximums, and those ratios kind of changing just because of the need. And once again, it brings in the fact of multimodal and all this stuff. I'm not a transportation guy. I mean, that's just a the high end of it.
Most municipalities have parking ratios.
Yes, and like I said, we do too. It just, and what our ordinance, no. But what our ordinance did, and we talked about this with Marvin Grove, was that we have that Main Street district, which is in theory is what the Heritage District is. We just still kept the Heritage District as well. There is a reduction, and once again, it's based off of shared parking and all this other stuff, because if you think about most typical downtowns, or commercial hubs, like, they're walkable. Once again, I'm not saying we have to all agree. I mean, it's just like, I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think there's a clear right answer on what the minimum parking is. Everybody's gonna have a different opinion. I'm just stating what other municipalities do, what our ordinance state, and what that trend is. And as you've asked, the applicant can provide their additional information on that as well.
I think you guys did a beautiful job in reimagining the buildings. Obviously, there's concerns about parking. I think your lighting plan sounds great. I am just concerned about what would go in this space, like a restaurant and like having 4 buildings and then loading it up with a high turnover restaurant or, high turnover coffee shop. Although I love the idea of a coffee shop, just don't let it be Starbucks. I didn't actually say that on record, please strike that. But, it is concerning from a neighbor perspective for the neighbors behind you. So, I don't see this yet. I don't see the vision yet. I see the beautiful design. I just don't see what it's gonna be, how is this different? How is it gonna serve the community? And we need to make sure that people can actually afford to rent from you. Do you know what I mean? If it's gonna be so expensive for you to develop this land with this current plan, how high are your rents gonna be? And can small businesses actually afford that square foot, that price per square foot? Because I have a friend who just closed her store for 9 or 10 years in Blakeney because they kept raising the rents, and she's now a teacher. So, it's gotta be well, I know, I'm just saying, it's gotta be, if you end up doing something commercially, it's gotta be successful, and at what cost? Well, I know, that's what I'm saying, is it really worth it?
He knows his own ROI, he knows what they talk about, how much that's gonna be, none of it was cheap, what they told us.
I do realize that, and I didn't want to bring anything to the board with what I envisioned, and I asked him, I said, just go overboard. Whatever we see everybody's happy with is what we're gonna build. Yeah,
You weren't the only one.
It's all about you, John, it's all about you.
So with that being said, is there anything else you guys would like to mention? Is there any last questions? Once again, this was the first presentation to you. Now, based off the feedback and stuff the applicants received, they'll fine-tune their plan, provide and work on getting you that information and documentation. It'll be on the agenda again during the March meeting. At that time, staff will have their staff report done with compliance with the ordinance, as well as detailed overview of the project. And we'll also, staff will begin working with the applicant and their team on those conditions of the development agreement and the development standards, so they can basically finalize their rezoning submittal for the planning board to make a recommendation. So we'll go from there.
TIA, you'll be ready at that point as well?
Yes.
Yeah, he said a couple weeks.
Okay.
Even if you had to, we'll rush it. Try to get it out as
rush, but yeah, it'd be nice to have it.
See if we can get down to 17. See if we can get down to 17,000.
17.
That's above my pay grade, I don't even know, I can't, yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, discussion of questions for 2025 community survey. It's a late night for us.
Yes.
We're going back, we're reverting back to the old days.
Don't say that out loud.
This is early for 19.
We need to have like a mid-meeting espresso break or
Yeah,
something.
right. Open the coffee shop up.
Can we turn
So-
the AC on? Good Lord.
In short, we did our last community survey in 2019. You know, we've talked about this community results all the time. That was the basis for the bond hearings. We're doing a new community survey this year. Angel was very kind to volunteer her time, and she worked on these questions for quite a while with us and a few council members. We're in a very happy place with these questions. The Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Board right now, they're reviewing their 2020 Parks and Greenways Master Plan. They're formulating questions right now to be added to this to focus on topics of their interest. We're asking you all to do the same, to look at these survey questions. Is there anything that you think is missing? Is there additional questions you want to add? Do you think something should be worded different? We're trying to seek your feedback. My goal is for both boards to be done by March, April, so I can then get this to the council, have it in their final form, and then we can move forward with a vendor, which their contract would start after July 1st of the new fiscal year. We would then finalize the questions with them, make sure there's any kind of issues that they would have over wording, leading questions, anything that could skew the results. And then it would go out to the community for a month or two, and then we would have a final report and presentation at a council meeting this year. So essentially, looking for your input. We can talk about this today. It will be back on the agenda at the next meeting.
I
We're
reviewed
asking-
the questions. I think you did a great job. I thought it touched, I looked at it with the intent of trying to add something, and I thought it really did I think it was a really good job, so good job.
It was a group effort.
Yeah, well, credit to the group, because I went with the intention of trying to look at something. And
I'm going to have to pull Angel in for more projects.
Absolutely. If it works.
Ken's raising his hand.
Ken, do you have a question, or are you just high-fiving us virtually?
I have a question or a comment on the issue I have with surveys is response rates and how you get them to be sort of properly representative of the community. You look at, what happened the last time. Obviously, the surveys we did weren't an accurate gauge of what our community was thinking. Have we talked about one of the, in my line of business, a lot of our clients try to incentivize people to respond with, it may sound gimmicky, but like with even lotteries or prizes where you'd say, if you submit the response, you're eligible to receive a gift card, a chance to win a gift card. Just trying to get people to respond.
And I get that.
Tax break?
We cannot do that.
Oh, man.
That's not a discussion that we've had. I will say the circumstances around the survey will be dramatically different from the last one. We had frankly, a very poor quality of public communications back in 2019. We barely had a social media presence. We had a very good but still low readership with our emails. Since then, our readership with emails we went from a 15% open rate to a 40%. We've been at 50% before. We even reached 60. Some of those numbers, we've had to, we track analytics. We're doing much better now than we did back then. Our social media presence, we're on multiple platforms. We have, I would probably say, double as many followers. And we are in touch with the public a lot more now than we ever have been. The way the survey is planned to be distributed is people will hear about it through our online communications, but everyone will receive a unique identifier code in the mail. It'll be one response per household. So it's meant to encourage discussions between spouses and families. If you're in an invited household, have fun with that. But we're confident that if in the end that this is going to be, that we're going to have a higher response rate, because I think now people understand that when we ask for your input, we're serious. The 2019 survey, that gave us direction for the next 5 years. And it's very likely that this survey will give direction for the next 5 years. Maybe shorter, maybe we'll do another one sooner, but I can't say that for sure.
Are you So with that, the unique identifier was something that we would have liked to have done in the previous.
We did.
Right, so we ended up doing it.
We did, though,
But it was supposed to be a paper survey. We were trying to offer a paper survey and an
We'll always have a paper option where if someone wants to fill it out physically, they can come here and do it. And but essentially what happens is they hand us, we give them a copy of it to fill out in person. They give it back to us. We cancel out, us and the vendor, we cancel out their unique identifier codes. They no longer can put in a second result. And then we would either give that survey to the vendor, or we would enter it for them.
So the paper survey is when you send a unique identifier out in the mail, you're also not sending the survey?
No. You will not get a physical survey in the mail. You will get what I imagine to be a postcard with, like you're gonna scratch off the back. No, it'll have a series of probably letters and numbers for you to type in as like a password, and that is tied to your address specifically. That's the goal of how we're going to distribute it. I think this is going to be a very good process. I think we're going to learn a lot, and I have very high hopes for a good response rate. One that's more representative.
Tell us what you think.
What?
The response rate. What's your goal?
Oh, I'm not going to time myself to that. I know. Ken's got another question.
In reference to what we were just talking about with Ravi, we, out of that 2019 survey, we did ask questions about what kind of businesses or services Marvinites we would like to see if there were a heritage district, what services would people use? And that's where we came up with our initial list of approved uses. I didn't really see that in here. Would that be something we'd be able to add as to what types of services would you actually use?
I mean,
we've already,
the reason that we have not touched on that area is we just adopted the MDO. We've gone through this process multiple times. We've identified uses for properties and zoning districts. We're not trying to reopen that can of worms,
No, not new ones, but out of the approved ones, which ones are the most likely that you would actually utilize? Do you know what I mean?
I do. So are you saying, so if more people say they want to see restaurants or a pub or a billiards?
Or childcare center.
Or childcare.
That's how rumors get started.
Dance studio. I mean, because this way, it may be something you give to Robbie or another developer who says, oh, that would be a good use. It's an approved use and it would be a good use. So we would then have to, I guess you would have to do a link to the current uses and then say, out of these uses here, are there things that you would like to see?
There is something to be said for making a question too complex too.
And I think
And that's one of the things we're going to have to balance with this. We're already at 30 questions right now. I expect we'll probably add a few more. We might curate this a little bit. We might end up removing a question or two. We're going to have a discussion with our vendor about at what point do we risk confusing someone who's responding by asking them too complex of a question. And I fear that might be an area we're going to get into if we start drilling down into very specific uses for specific properties or specific areas.
I think their eyes will glaze over. Because really, 30 questions is a lot.
Well, it looks like 9 and 10 is answered in 8, or is that a different angle?
The question 9 focuses on specifically partnering with another municipality for athletic fields, a sports complex. That's more like a public-private partnership question, whereas question 8 focuses on what kind of amenities would you like to see in the village as a whole. So we break them down a little bit and going into a couple specific ones. That question's on there because the council has discussed in the past partnering with the town of Waxhaw to develop a plot of land to be a sports complex, a series of athletic fields that would be used by both municipalities. That's where that question came from. That's a very specific question.
That won't cause any more traffic.
If we get the people from South Carolina to stop driving through.
Traffic was a big deal, I'm sorry.
But does anyone have any suggestions for questions, anything they want to see on here, anything that you think should be
It's
removed?
very well done. I do too. Yeah. Kudos.
In terms of the Parks and Rec, and this is kind of a little off topic, I'm hearing a lot of, I don't use the trails because they're not connected to my neighborhood. My neighbors made sure of that years ago, so.
You guys are good at that.
Yeah, well, you know. That's what happens
It's a
when
joke.
rural communities, man, we're tough cookies. I'm concerned about the knives and some of the comments tonight were that, like, they're finding weapons and tents and things back on the trails and.
If there are weapons being found, that's not something that I'm aware of. I don't know if that's I've not heard of this. Have you heard of anything like this?
No, I mean, the only thing that that we've been aware of is, yes, there was a tent or tarp, I guess, reported to the village. I know that our deputies, there's still not been any crime associated on our trails or any weapons found. The tarp, to our best knowledge, looked like it was kids playing. But I can't say that for certain. I'm just saying what our opinion is. But other than that, no, there's been no other documented crimes on our trails.
We've had an issue of a motorized vehicle, like an
Yeah.
ATV on the trails that we're dealing with, but that's pretty minor, and we're working on it.
So,
No comments from the audience, please.
so are greenways, walking trails important to you? I'm wondering if we should also be asking, do you use the greenways, walking trails?
And that's a question.
Is that a question
is
that Park and
question
Recs
for
is
Parks.
actually, like, asking what?
Yes, that's one of them they're talking about right now, talking about the usage of our facility specifically. So that one will be added. We're working on the wording right now. We're gonna have a running list for that board, and it's gonna be updated at their next two meetings. And I expect they'll be done, I would hope March, but probably April.
And then, and I'm sorry, I was buried in a grant, so I was not able to
One other,
dig into this.
if I
but-
could just
Mhm, go ahead.
quickly jump in, because Robbie said something about potentially a sheriff's, a substation.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Is that something that we could throw in here? Would people like to see a substation? Because it was talked about at Marvin Gordon's and nothing ever happened.
It came up at our council retreat, actually, as an
Mhm.
idea. That would be a discussion that we would have to open with the sheriff's office to even see if that's something they're interested in.
Right.
Obviously, they have one in Indian Trail. Their main office is close to Wingate, so they're pretty far away from here. So maybe that is something they'll be interested in. That's a question, that's a separate conversation we have to open.
Well, number 20 kind of discusses that. It asks you to rank the issues facing Marvin, and one of them safety. So, if it's a high safety issue, if that comes in high, that would be a red flag or a green flag that, hey, maybe we should review that.
Yeah, and the reason, it got brought up at our retreat, and it's been, I've had that conversation with the Marvin Grove developer as well as Robbie. Law enforcement office / sheriff substation is a permitted use in the Heritage District. What came up at our retreat, in short, was that, as the village staff continues to grow, and looking to potentially add, potential future law enforcement in the future and the space needed, it would be a benefit to potentially have a substation, because, our deputies respond to Marvin calls unless it's some type of serious thing, but there's still other deputies patrolling the area for what I think zoned for. I can't. And so that substation would allow for our deputies, on top of other Union County deputies that are patrolling the area, to have a place to take a break and/or file their reports, all that stuff. So it is typical. You see it kind of throughout, especially in larger counties, just to allow for their officers to have some place more centralized, local, than having to go all the way to Monroe. That would not include a jail or holding cell, by the way. Just want to clarify.
Thank you.
Essentially what I'm asking y'all, if you all are good with it, good with how it is now, and you don't have any changes, I'm going to say that you guys have had your input. I'm going to move back to the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Board. So give me your seal of approval if you're ready.
The only other thing I wanted to ask, and I feel like we also addressed this in the 2019 one, is, do you know where to go to get information on active projects, regulations, like whatever it is?
We do have a couple questions on the effectiveness of our communications. Are you hearing from us too much, not enough, just right? Do you follow us on social media? Where do you get your news and information? Our email newsletters, our social media, the village website, local newspapers, TV news, banner signage, direct mail, other. So we are working to include that. That's the last few questions on the survey. 23 through 29 focuses on communications.
Say that again, I missed that.
Questions 23 through 29 focus on like our communications with the public. If asking, are they getting news from us? Are they hearing enough from us? Are we drowning them in emails? Because I've heard that too. Ken?
I kind of like the emails that I get because I don't use Nextdoor. I've now deleted myself off of Facebook and others.
I left Nextdoor a long time ago. Great decision.
I don't like
Me
the
too.
vitriol that people spew behind keyboards who they think that, whatever.
Ken's got a question?
So what you said that.
He might not have raised his hand or lowered it.
No, I have a question. No, just a comment. Question 14, I think we should clarify that because it really doesn't tell you very much. Are you pleased with the number of events held? It doesn't say whether there's too many or too few.
So should it be like a multiple choice? Too many, too few, just
Strongly
right,
agree,
not enough?
neutral.
At least go ABC. You're gonna get a yes or a no, and you're not gonna know what it means.
And that's an area that the Parks, Recreation, Greenways Board is also talking about, because they do handle our events. And that's and we do have the following question too: what events, if any, would you like to see held in Marvin annually? We do get good ideas from residents for events. We've had a couple pilot events in the past year that have been very successful. We did our stargazing night. We did a Marvin's Day Camp where we sent we partnered with Union County and had paddleboarding and archery lessons at King Creek Park in Waxhaw, outside of Waxhaw, and we had all Marvin kids there for that, and I think it was 30 kids. So we've got some cool ideas, and we're hoping to get some more ideas through this survey.
Are there any openings on Park and Recs?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
You want to swap that?
Yeah. Half for tonight. Yeah, I think, great job, Angel.
Thanks.
All right. Anybody else have anything else before we move on to a planner's report, if there is such a thing, and I'm not on, do we have a planner's report?
No, but I just want to mention and thank everybody from the public that came out and attended tonight. Once again, regarding whatever project you were here for, we do have a projects page that is updated weekly with, the tentative date. So once again, since the rezoning for the 9709 Marvin School Road property was recommended by Planning Board tonight, the website will be updated with that tentative public hearing date in April. Regarding the commercial heritage district rezoning, that was also considered. Once again, to clarify, Planning Board did not make any formal recommendation, so it will be on their agenda for the March and potentially April meeting before a recommendation to the council is made. So,
March is with council, right? Next meeting's with council?
So the way that will work is we will open up the meeting as a joint meeting. Council will open up their meeting, you'll open up your meeting. Once you get past the adoption of the agenda, we'll be in the joint meeting. I'm capping it at 30 minutes because you guys have a lot to talk about, and no one has submitted topics to me for y'all to talk about together. So,
What are we going to talk about? I thought we put on the streetlight signs on Marvin Road. I thought we were going to talk to them about that.
That was mentioned.
Oh, I'll add that. I can add that.
Yeah, that's Marvin, yeah.
Marvin and Joker, yeah.
And I'm sure if not, something that we will probably also discuss will be regarding plan documents, our land use plan, potential updates or doing an overall, I mean, like a overall comprehensive land use plan, kind of redoing it, but building on it. That's stuff that I know council has been discussing with me, and discussing as, for them, and so I'm sure that would be a topic of our conversation as well.
Streetlights just on Marvin Road or?
Yeah, where Marvin meets Charlotte from, because they already have it, run over the bridge where Charlotte did it, so all the way up Marvin Road.
I literally just almost ran into the back of that car sitting there.
We've had another accident on there.
But is it just Marvin Road? That's Rich
Well,
Marvin?
I mean, that's where we,
Or is there any other
that's where the
problem
most
areas?
accidents are in Marvin.
Where the lighting is
Okay. So I'll add that.
Thank you.
So the way it'll work is you'll have the joint session for like 30 minutes. The council will adjourn. They'll leave. You guys will pick up with adopting your minutes. You guys will make your selection of officers, chair and vice chair for the year. And then you'll go through public comment and then your standard order of business, unfinished business, new business. Since you guys were good with the survey, I won't put that back on the next meeting, so I'll have one less.
I would like to discuss, I'd like to hear from the council about rezoning applications
In what context?
in the context of, especially for rural properties going to SFR1, and what they're, because in my mind, when we did the land use plan, there was a very specific goal of trying to preserve large lots, rural, and now it seems like all of it is. Okay, well, I'm trying to explain just so you can, just ask ChatGPT to summarize my comments. I am concerned about the number of, and it's not been a lot, but it's enough. We don't have a lot of land left, but I'm concerned about the number of rural lots being rezoned SFR1 and minor subdivisions. And so I'm interested to hear from them on their opinion of this and how or what is the strategy for preserving land if we're going to continue to allow continue to allow rural residential
I got this.
to be rezoned to SFR1.
Keep it broad with discussion of the rezoning process.
That'd be great.
Well,
I'm
I was
happy
going to
to-
say, this also,
Happy to talk to them about it.
the,
I'll get my thoughts together prior to then.
this also should be part of, I mean, in my opinion, of the land use plan updates or that, because that's, once again, rezonings, if an application's submitted, it's got to be heard. But, as we discussed tonight, your planning board as well as council is looking at that and looking if it's consistent with the plan, consistent with the future land use map. And that's part of the problem. Our future land use map just says residential and it's all the same properties and it sucks. If you look at, almost any other municipality's future land use map, they break out the density, like low, medium, high. You can even regulate future land use as keeping that future land use designation as open space, or agriculture, farm, whatever. That's why I struggle with our land use plan.
You're talking about the map, though, like. I
Well, I'm
feel
talking
like
about both, because
In the written, it was very clearly outlined, and now I guess some of these properties are zoned heritage districts, so that transitional density is just being.
that's where, like I said, if you review our plan, there's like I said, in my opinion, there's some contradictory on, one thing says this, and then another goal objective says this, but if you really didn't put them together when reviewing certain rezonings, they contradict each other. So which one's consistent?
So that's what we need to know, is where are those points so that we can provide clarity? Because they shouldn't contradict each other. It should be very clear.
No, I agree. That's why I've been talking about land use plan updates and all this. So, but ultimately, yes, like that land use document, that future land use destination, once again, always can be changed. Council, whoever's elected, planning, they can always approve something that's not consistent with the plan. They have to justify that, but that plan's more of your concrete foundation. Planning board has to reference it during their recommendation. Council has to reference it during their potential approvals. And so you know, it gives more of that foundation and to kind of give you guys clearer direction and guidelines on what you're reviewing and the consistency and not. And that's why I want to update it and not do it
Right now, I feel
again.
like everything says it's consistent with the land use plan, and the land use plan that I remember writing was not that, so
Well, there
I'm
was a lot of
concerned.
deviations that were done with like the Zepsa property. There was like,
Well, that's Heritage District, so.
Yeah. But like,
even from what the MDO was to, I mean, to me, it just seemed like we were changing we were deviating a lot of things to accommodate them, and I wonder why we did that.
regarding the, like I said, a little off topic, where there wasn't any deviations other than minor clarification in gross floor area and building height. But there wasn't any deviations from the ordinance of part of their approval.
Well, like setback went from 100 to 50.
That the ordinance dictated that.
That was the Heritage District ordinance,
Yeah.
not the residential. Okay. Yeah.
So, and once again, like the land use plan, like goals and objective, like yes, there's a section in there that talks about preserving and maintaining, but then there's another section that talks about residential density and residential development. Like, you have your goals and recommendations, then you have your map. And if your map should correspond with those goals and recommendations, i.e. if the property is identified on the future land use map as agriculture, open space, whatever, then it goes with those kind of goals and recommendations. And if it's recommended as low-density residential, then you have those kind of parameters. So you clarify that, and our land use plan has that foundation. It's just, you can ask Pauline, she's went through a lot of plans lately. There's better ways to make it clearer and really spell out that vision of the village and all that.
But will that also address everyone who's like, well, I used to be SFR1, I want to go back to that, even though you're rural residential now? Like,
Yeah.
is that the argument we're going to hear every single time with anyone who wants to subdivide their land over 3 acres?
I mean,
The argument is like, it's already been used at least twice,
No, and I agree. Like I said, it's one of those things, like, with the adoption of the MDO, at least we have the process to planning board and council doesn't have to approve the rezoning. I mean, that is the process, because under the old ordinance, they could have just done it.
Well, and that's really what I'm getting at, is that where is the council's head on this? Because it's clear that even this group is divided, right, on what the priority is. Do we preserve the land, or do we let the
I do also think that's a hard question, because opinions change, and elected bodies change, like the
Sorry, say that again?
opinions change on top of the elected body change. That's where those plans and the ordinance really stays consistent, as in, like, that's your thing. Because, yeah, I mean, it's legislative decisions are a case by case. There's not precedent set, I mean, all that. So it's kind of really hard to determine that. I mean, like I said, they can give you their opinion, but ultimately it's reviewing the application, reviewing what's being proposed, and weighing it against the ordinance, and what it could be with, if approved, and what the ordinance states on top of that consistency and what the land use plan says.
But we have to be fair and consistent. So to sit there and say that it's reasonable and consistent technically is one thing.
Yep.
But then if I'm going to be consistent, I'm either going to vote for it every time or I'm not, because otherwise that I'm saying, well, I don't like you, I'm not voting for you because you have a green sweater on today.
Fine.
And you're wearing a parka and I like that. I mean, but that makes it difficult for us.
No, and once again, understood, and that's where the process and the public hearing, I mean, once again, because council legislative decisions are really the last thing control. I mean, Rick beat this into us over and over again. And council doesn't have to approve it. I mean, once again, you don't know. I mean, and that's, once again, the elected body is that governing board. But, you know, that's why we have the public hearing, because you can have, the same things that were brought up tonight during public comment will be shared with council. And that could impact how they vote on this. I mean, on that rezoning or any rezoning in the future. Once again, under the old ordinance, we had that, where you had a public hearing for a subdivision, but the subdivision was permitted by right. There was nothing the council could have done. And so that's where that rezoning process is key. I mean, and Rick said this, I've said this, like, I can guarantee that you are probably going to see anywhere from 3 to 5 rezoning applications a year because of people that are interested in property or own property that want to potentially subdivide. You're gonna see something crazy submitted. It's gonna happen. Doesn't mean it's gonna get approved, but it's gonna happen. It's part of the process. It's the one legal thing that the village can hold on to and have say in how the development is controlled.
So if all of the elements for rezoning are met, can council still vote no for it?
Yeah, they just better not say anything after and why they voted no.
Okay.
Just keep your mouth shut. Like, they should just, the vote fails and they just don't say anything other than that.
Move on. I'll have that topic on there as, I can either put it on as just a greater discussion of the land use plan update, or I can just put it as both, like discuss the rezoning process and the land use plan, something like that.
Yeah, because I'll forget by the time we get there.
Okay, I got you. And we're gonna do this all in 30 minutes? I'm gonna hold y'all to it. I'll have a timer with a buzzer.
So we get 30 minutes with council once a year. Just ask.
We can stay later.
You can request more.
I'm the one that likes, you know, I like to.
It's weird coming from you, like to be out by.
Yeah, that's right. So when you hear from me.
Time's a ticking. Do we have any wiggle room to extend it if we need it? I know we have a full agenda, but.
If the agenda is lighter than we think, then yes.
Yeah, the only thing planning board business-wise that will be on the agenda will be the conditional rezoning that was discussed tonight. But as of right now, there's no other applications or anything, and depending on timing and stuff, I mean, I'm gonna be out of town the whole first week of March, so unless something's submitted like by the end of the week, it's not gonna be on planning board's agenda for March.
I give you 45 minutes.
So generous. All right, we don't have any action items unless folks are gonna take a deeper dive into the community survey report and provide feedback. Do that on your own time. Board member comments. Ken, how about we start with you since you're virtuoso?
I blame Michael for telling me this is going to be a short meeting.
Yeah, aren't you glad you showed up?
He jinxed me. But no, I'm fine. Hopefully I'll be healthier next month.
All right, we'll feel better.
I better be.
Is Bob Markley still on?
I'm still here.
You got the floor, sir.
Thank you. I will, because of my delay getting on, I'm very interested in listening to the public comments. So I will be, very interested in what they were saying. I only heard just the tail end of, I guess, the last person that was commenting. However, I do say that the applicants did speak well. So hearing that part, so I'm of their project. So other than that, we've had a lot of very meaty topics this particular Tuesday. So we got a lot to think on. But thank you for all of you participating and your support on being on the planning board.
Thank you, Bob. I do think there was some misinformation going on in some of the comments, so I don't know if you guys wanted to find a way to address those or just let them go, but I was hearing some things that I was like, that has nothing to do with this. So it might just be that folks who are new to town.
The only one I will say is the GO bonds have nothing to do with the Marvin Heritage District. The GO bonds were focused on the accepting and maintenance of neighborhood roads and connector roads, the building of trails and sidewalks, and the additional funds for the Village Hall Park. They had nothing to do with any development that has been proposed in the Marvin Heritage District.
Yes, I think that was getting a little confusing for folks who are new to town, so. John?
So it brings back memories of long meetings.
Yes, it does.
I think it went well.
Staff, thank you very much for all your preparation and kudos on adding to the survey. It was fantastic. Thank you.
And she did it in less than 5 months like we did.
Good meeting. Appreciate the community coming out and showing their interest in projects. Usually it's very apathetic, so it was good to see a lot of people here voicing their opinions. Appreciate that, and thank you, staff, as well.
Marcus?
I'm good.
Angel? I'm with you. All right. Staff, thank you. It was a heated discussion tonight. I'm disappointed in one of the votes, but we will take that up with council at our March meeting. Gotta start preserving some land, kids. Gotta walk the walk. All right, anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
8:56.
And
Please, I've already
Michael
spoken
Lavelle,
too much.
please, can we get a motion to adjourn, Michael?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
So.
All right,
No,
so
you're
moved. Thank you,
good.
everybody.